The first light of dawn crept slowly over the horizon, spilling soft, golden threads through the dense canopy of towering trees. The forest stirred in quiet rhythms, each sound deliberate, each movement meaningful. Mist clung to the undergrowth, curling like ethereal fingers around moss-covered trunks, and the scent of damp earth mingled with the faint aroma of wild herbs. Birds began their tentative songs, tentative whispers that trembled in the cold morning air, and somewhere in the distance, a branch snapped under the weight of an unseen creature. It was a world that had existed for centuries, untouched by time, a place of both beauty and danger, a place where life and death were constantly negotiating their fragile truce. In the midst of this ancient wilderness moved a lone figure, a mother, her form small against the grandeur of the forest but determined in her purpose. Her eyes, alert and observant, scanned the ground and the shadows, taking in every detail, the broken twig, the subtle indentation in the soft soil, the faint rustle that suggested movement. Her children, nestled in the safety of a hidden thicket nearby, slept in quiet vulnerability, unaware of the peril and the promise that surrounded them. She moved like a wisp of wind, careful yet unyielding, attuned to the language of the forest, to the whispered signals that life offered in this primeval world. Every instinct, honed through countless generations, guided her steps. Her breath came steady, a rhythm in harmony with the pulse of the land, and each heartbeat carried the weight of responsibility, of survival, of love. The forest itself seemed alive in ways that transcended mere biology. Shadows stretched and contracted as the sunlight filtered through the canopy, creating shifting patterns that both concealed and revealed the secrets of the wilderness. Each tree bore the memory of seasons past, scars etched into their bark like hieroglyphs of time. Moss and lichen clung to surfaces with stubborn persistence, thriving in the damp darkness, quietly claiming their place in the cycle of growth and decay. Small streams, barely more than trickles, wound their way through the underbrush, their waters singing the ancient song of endurance. The mother paused for a moment, listening, feeling, inhaling the essence of the world around her. There was a rhythm to the forest, an order to the seeming chaos, and she moved in quiet reverence through its corridors. Above her, the canopy shifted with the awakening of the day. Sunlight, piercing through gaps, created glowing beams that danced upon the forest floor. Tiny motes of dust hovered in the light, each a microcosm of the life that thrived unseen. The rustle of leaves announced the movement of small creatures, squirrels, rodents, and insects, busy in their own pursuit of survival. The air was thick with the mingling scents of earth, leaves, and distant water, and she inhaled deeply, committing the sensory details to memory. Every element of this forest was both ally and adversary. The same trees that offered shelter could conceal predators. The same streams that promised water could harbor danger. Every step required attention, awareness, and an unspoken respect for the balance of life and death. The mother's hands brushed against ferns and low-hanging branches as she moved. Each touch was gentle but purposeful, a dialogue with the environment itself. She could read the subtle signs, a bent twig, a faint depression in the soil, the way moss clung differently to one side of a log than another. These were not just signs of life, they were messages, guidance in a world where survival depended on perception, intelligence, and adaptability. Her mind worked constantly, processing the patterns of nature, predicting movement, and calculating risk. And yet, despite the constant vigilance, there was space for awe. Even in the harshness of her task, the mother could not help but marvel at the intricate beauty of the forest, at the silent choreography of life that unfolded around her with unerring precision. Somewhere in the distance, the sound of water shifted, perhaps a small waterfall, or the gentle rush of a river hidden behind dense growth. Birds flitted across branches, their wings catching the sunlight in flashes of gold and bronze. The air held a crispness that spoke of early morning chill, but also a promise: the day was beginning, full of potential, danger, and discovery. And then came the sound that made her pause, a low, distant howl. Not the sound of wind or falling branch, but deliberate, resonant, and alive. It was the voice of a predator, a hunter, and yet it carried a strange rhythm, a message to those who knew how to listen. The mother's ears twitched, her instincts sharpening. Wolves, she knew, were near. Their tracks might lead her to food, or to danger, but in this world, every risk was a possibility, every opportunity inseparable from peril. The forest seemed to hold its breath as she listened. There was a strange beauty in this tension, a poetry in the balance of predator and prey, of hunger and caution, of life and death. She allowed herself a moment to feel the weight of history pressing down, the countless generations who had moved through similar landscapes, reading the same signs, hearing the same calls, making the same decisions under the same sun and moon. She was both small and infinite, a single thread in the vast tapestry of life. And yet, she carried within her the most vital mission, to feed, protect, and guide her children through this perilous world. Her gaze shifted to the sleeping forms hidden among the undergrowth, and a determination unlike any other settled in her bones. The forest, ancient and imposing, would not yield easily, but neither would she. With cautious, deliberate steps, she advanced further, the soft ground muffling her movement. Mist rose and fell around her like living clouds, wrapping her in an otherworldly veil. Each sound was amplified, the snap of twig underfoot, the distant call of a bird, the faint rustle of fur against foliage. She moved with reverence, with purpose, and with an intimate understanding of the dance that governed the forest. Every breath, every movement, every glance was part of a greater awareness, a dialogue with the living, breathing world that surrounded her. In this moment, she was both observer and participant, hunter and nurturer, a figure of resilience in a world that demanded both courage and wisdom. The shadows of the ancient forest stretched long, but she moved with certainty, guided by instinct, by love, and by the unspoken promise that life, her children's life, would endure. The children stirred softly in the underbrush, their small forms curled into the protective embrace of a natural shelter the mother had chosen before nightfall. The fragile warmth of their bodies pressed against the cold earth, and yet they slept in relative safety, wrapped in the subtle sounds and smells of the forest. Each breath they took was a rhythm the mother counted silently, a pulse that reminded her of the weight she bore and the necessity of every action she took. Hunger was a constant companion, gnawing at her own body as much as it pressed against the needs of her children. It was a hunger that extended beyond food, a hunger for survival, for security, for the continuation of life itself. In this prehistoric world, there was no room for hesitation, every choice carried consequences that could echo across generations. Her own stomach ached, an ever-present reminder of scarcity and the unforgiving rules of nature. She had eaten little in the past day, gathering only what she could find through the forest floor, the shallow roots and edible herbs that offered minimal sustenance. The children's cries, had they woken, would have been unbearable, but as they slept, she could sense their latent dependence. She touched their tiny hands lightly, feeling the warmth and softness that would soon demand her full attention. The thought of feeding them, of nourishing life with her own sweat and ingenuity, sparked a mixture of fear and determination. Her body ached from fatigue, her muscles tight from hours of movement and vigilance, yet the primal drive to provide for those she loved surged stronger than the pain. Hunger, she realized, was not merely a physical sensation, it was a compass, a guide toward action, a signal of the responsibilities that defined her existence. The forest around her seemed to mirror her internal tension, quiet but alive, patient but relentless. Sunlight grew stronger with each passing moment, warming the damp earth and glinting off dew-laden leaves. The faint murmurs of animals preparing for the day rose from the undergrowth, birds flitting from branch to branch, a fox slipping silently through shadows, insects moving with urgent purpose. All of them, like her, were creatures defined by survival. Yet in this moment, her focus narrowed, every sound and movement filtered through the lens of necessity. A fallen branch snapped somewhere in the distance, and her ears perked instinctively. Danger could lurk anywhere, but so could opportunity. Her eyes scanned the terrain, catching the smallest irregularities in the soil, the subtle impressions left by animals passing through during the night. Every detail mattered. Every decision could tip the balance between life and death. Her mind wandered briefly to the children's future. How would they remember these days, if they survived? Would the lessons she imparted through action rather than words linger in their memories? Even in the harshness of this world, there was room for reflection. The mother understood that feeding them today was not simply about filling empty stomachs, it was about teaching them resilience, awareness, and respect for the natural order. Each step she took in search of sustenance was a lesson in observation, patience, and adaptation. The forest itself became a silent teacher, offering guidance through signs, sounds, and scents that the mother interpreted with meticulous care. She was not merely hunting, she was engaging in a dialogue with life, negotiating with the environment, and translating the hidden messages that nature provided. The wolves she had heard, the tracks she had seen, they were all pieces of a larger puzzle that demanded intelligence, intuition, and courage. She began moving carefully, each step deliberate, leaving no trace for potential predators while following the subtle clues that hinted at nearby food. The rhythm of her movement echoed the rhythm of her heartbeat, steady and unyielding, yet punctuated by moments of sharp attention. The undergrowth resisted, branches brushing against her skin, roots threatening to trip her, uneven terrain challenging her balance. Yet she pressed on, guided by the twin engines of necessity and love. Hunger sharpened her senses, making her acutely aware of smells, sounds, and textures that might have gone unnoticed in more comfortable circumstances. A faint scent of meat drifted on the wind, mingling with the earthy aroma of damp soil. Her eyes traced disturbed leaves and scuffed earth, recognizing signs of prey or edible plants. Every movement, every observation, was calculated to maximize the chance of providing for her children. As she progressed, her thoughts returned to the children's vulnerability. The younger they were, the more entirely they relied on her. Their small hands could not grasp tools or weapons, their legs could not chase or flee. She was the bridge between safety and exposure, nourishment and starvation, life and death. This awareness brought a weight of responsibility that pressed on her chest like the morning mist. Yet it also sparked resilience, a profound strength that seemed to flow from some deep, ancestral well. She imagined the generations of mothers before her, surviving under similar conditions, and drew courage from the continuity of life. Her struggle was individual, yes, but it was also universal, echoing across time. In that thought, there was both solace and urgency. Her hunger, though sharp, became secondary to the needs of the children, driving her forward with relentless determination. Her journey took her to the edge of a small clearing, where sunlight broke through the trees and illuminated patches of grass swaying gently in the morning breeze. She paused, crouched low, observing the movement of smaller animals, rabbits nibbling at shoots, birds pecking at seeds. Every creature was a potential guide, a signal, or a warning. Her eyes followed the tracks of a fox, then a hare, then a subtle disturbance in the soil that suggested larger game had passed through. The forest communicated in these signs, and she was fluent in its language. Each observation sharpened her instincts, refining her understanding of distance, speed, and behavior. Hunger gnawed again, but she welcomed it, using it as fuel, a reminder of her purpose. Every movement of her body, every scan of her surroundings, was in service of feeding her children, ensuring that their fragile lives continued in the unforgiving wilderness. She thought of the wolves again, recalling their howls from earlier, and a strange connection stirred within her. These predators, fierce and relentless, were both rival and teacher. Their movements left trails, their behaviors provided insight. Following such guidance could mean sustenance or disaster, but the mother weighed the risks carefully. Her mind calculated, yet her heart guided, and together, they charted a path that balanced need and caution. Every step forward was a negotiation with the unknown, an act of courage, an assertion of life in a world where death was never far behind. Hunger, she realized, was not merely a void, it was a map, a motivation, a mirror reflecting both human fragility and extraordinary resilience. In feeding her children, she fed a deeper truth, the enduring, unbroken will to survive, to love, and to nurture even in the harshest conditions. Time passed in this careful rhythm, minutes stretching into hours as she tracked, observed, and calculated. Sunlight shifted, shadows lengthened, and the forest continued its silent symphony around her. The mother paused once more, inhaling the scent of the earth, the distant river, the faint aroma of life and death intertwined. She felt the pangs of hunger, but they were now interwoven with purpose and clarity. She was a vessel of sustenance, a guardian of fragile life, and a witness to the intricate beauty of the world around her. Every movement, every choice, every heartbeat was aligned with the singular goal of feeding and protecting her children. In this moment, the primal urgency of hunger and the profound depth of maternal love became inseparable, guiding her through the forest with unwavering determination and quiet reverence. The morning air vibrated with a sound both haunting and mesmerizing, a distant, rolling howl that traveled through the forest like a wave of unseen presence. The mother froze, crouching low behind a cluster of ferns, letting the sound wash over her, her senses sharpening in response. It was neither entirely threatening nor entirely benign, it carried a resonance that demanded attention, a signal of life moving through the vast wilderness. Wolves, she knew, were both hunters and teachers, creatures whose every action reflected the unyielding laws of survival. Their howls spoke of territory, of kinship, of hunger, and perhaps even of warning. She listened carefully, interpreting the subtle rise and fall of tone, the cadence, the echoes bouncing against tree trunks, attempting to decode the message written in sound. In this moment, the forest became an orchestra, and the wolves, its enigmatic conductors. Her heart quickened, a mixture of caution and curiosity coursing through her veins. Wolves were predators, yes, but they were also guides in an indirect sense, their movements revealing clues about the hidden rhythms of the land. Their tracks, once found, could lead to prey or to water, and their behaviors were patterns that an observant human could learn from. She adjusted her position, moving silently along the forest floor, eyes scanning the ground for any signs that might confirm their recent passage. Broken branches, disturbed earth, tufts of fur, all these were fragments of a narrative, a story told not in words but in movement and imprint. The mother's mind, honed by instinct and necessity, began piecing together these fragments, forming a picture of the wolves' path, their habits, and perhaps the opportunities that lay hidden along their route. The forest responded to the howls with subtle movement of its own. Birds lifted from branches, flapping into the sun-dappled sky with alarmed cries. Small mammals scurried in undergrowth, leaving faint impressions on the mossy soil. Even the trees seemed to lean slightly in the wind, as if acknowledging the presence of these wild guides. She felt the pulse of life vibrating through her chest, synchronizing with the distant calls. The sound was almost hypnotic, carrying with it a mixture of danger, wisdom, and inevitability. Wolves were creatures of the wilderness in a way humans could never truly be. They moved with precision, with instinctual clarity that only centuries of adaptation could produce. Yet the mother understood that by observing, by following, by interpreting, she too could participate in this intricate dance, bridging the divide between species through perception and intelligence. Her children remained safe in the hidden thicket, their breaths soft and steady, yet she thought of them constantly, calculating each step with meticulous care. Every decision had implications, not just for her own survival but for theirs. Following wolf tracks was not simply about curiosity, it was a strategy, a means to an end, a path toward sustenance. She moved slowly, deliberately, pausing at intervals to scan the environment, listening for further echoes. Each howl repeated, sometimes distant, sometimes sharp and immediate, layering the forest with a tapestry of sound that guided her like a living map. She felt a strange kinship, an unspoken connection with these creatures, who navigated the world through senses and knowledge as ancient as the stones beneath their feet. Their calls were a language she could not speak, yet one she understood in essence, warnings, signals, rhythms of survival. She remembered the stories whispered in fragmented human memory, lessons passed down through generations about the dangers and gifts of wolves. Some spoke of wolves as monsters, fierce and unyielding, while others described them as teachers, as guides whose patterns could be read and interpreted. The truth, she knew, lay somewhere in between. Wolves were neither good nor evil, they were elemental, natural, integral to the forest's balance. Observing them required patience, respect, and intuition. She crouched lower, noticing subtle signs on the ground, small, crescent-shaped paw prints, claw marks in soft soil, faint tufts of fur caught on branches. Each mark told a story, revealing the presence, direction, and possible intentions of these elusive animals. In their echoes, both vocal and physical, she found information essential to her survival and to that of her children. The mother's own senses became heightened, every nerve attuned to minute details. The wind shifted, carrying scents that mingled with the distant howl, the musky tang of wet fur, the earthy aroma of soil, the faint sweetness of crushed vegetation. She inhaled carefully, parsing the signals, separating the layers of information with practiced instinct. Her eyes followed the play of light on the forest floor, noting the shimmer of dew, the movement of insects, and the occasional shadow that suggested larger animals moving beyond her immediate vision. The forest was alive with interwoven stories, and she was learning to read them, not as an intruder, but as a participant in the ongoing, intricate narrative of survival. Hunger pressed at her ribs, a gnawing reminder of need, yet it sharpened her awareness rather than dulled it. Each howl, each trace, each sensory cue became a tool, a key to unlocking the forest's secrets. A sudden rustle to her left made her pause, muscles coiling like springs. A deer, perhaps, or a smaller predator moving silently among the underbrush? She held her breath, eyes fixed on the source, allowing the natural rhythm of caution to dictate her actions. The wolf's howls had become a guidepost, a compass of sound and instinct that allowed her to navigate not only the terrain but the uncertainties of life and death that defined her existence. She adjusted her footing carefully, mindful of snapping twigs, shifting leaves, and the unseen observers of the forest. Each movement was deliberate, each decision informed by the subtle interplay of instinct, observation, and experience. In the presence of wolves, she was reminded of the fragility and resilience of life, of the delicate balance between predator and prey, between risk and reward. Time passed slowly, measured by the intermittent howls and the steady pace of her movement. Shadows lengthened and shifted, sunlight piercing the canopy in narrow shafts, illuminating the forest in an ever-changing mosaic. The mother felt both tension and wonder, an emotional landscape shaped by fear, admiration, and awe. Wolves, in their distant majesty, were more than mere predators, they were symbols of the untamed, of wisdom embedded in instinct, of the primal logic that governed the natural world. She moved with care, following the echoes, interpreting the signs, and translating the wild language into steps that might feed her children. In that delicate act, she became both student and participant, guided by survival, propelled by love, and inspired by the living poetry of the forest around her. Every howl that rolled through the trees reminded her of her place in this world, a fragile, determined human among creatures evolved to master the wilderness. And yet, through observation, patience, and courage, she could navigate the same spaces, follow the same tracks, and glean the same knowledge that ensured life could continue. Wolves, she realized, were not just guides, they were mirrors of possibility, reflecting both danger and opportunity, instinct and intelligence, the rawness of survival, and the beauty of life intertwined with death. The echoes faded slowly, leaving a resonant silence that spoke just as powerfully, and the mother continued forward, guided by sound, memory, and the unyielding drive to sustain her children in a world defined by the constant dialogue between hunter and hunted. The morning chill deepened as the mother moved forward, the forest shifting around her in quiet anticipation. Snow lay thick upon the ground, a pristine blanket broken only by the faint imprints of creatures that had passed before her. Each depression in the powder was a story, a clue, a fragment of life that she could read if she allowed herself the patience and focus the forest demanded. She knelt briefly to examine the first tracks, noting their size, shape, and depth, letting her fingers trace the outlines of each paw print. Wolves had passed through here recently, she could feel it in the texture of the snow, the subtle distortion where weight had pressed down. Each print was a message written in silence, a sign of movement, purpose, and intent, and she studied them with a reverence reserved for the sacred mysteries of life. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying flakes of snow that clung to her hair and eyelashes, cold against her skin but invigorating, heightening every sense. The mother followed the trail with deliberate care, adjusting her stride to avoid disturbing the fragile evidence before her. She interpreted each detail. The spacing between tracks indicated speed, the depth suggested weight, and the subtle displacement of surrounding snow hinted at turns and pauses. The forest, under a mantle of white, seemed both gentle and unforgiving. The snow amplified every sound, the crunch beneath her feet, the snap of a branch, the distant call of a bird startled into flight. In this amplified silence, she felt the world more intensely, every sense alive to the slightest disturbance. The tracks were more than a path, they were a lifeline, guiding her through the vast wilderness toward sustenance for her children. Her breath misted in the cold air as she paused to examine a cluster of paw prints that veered toward a dense thicket. She crouched low, eyes scanning the surroundings for movement, noting the presence of broken twigs and displaced leaves beneath the snow. The wolves' trail led not just through open spaces, but across subtle obstacles, over fallen logs and icy patches, testing both predator and follower alike. Every detail mattered. The way snow had settled around rocks and roots offered hints of recent activity, perhaps a hare or deer had run this way moments before, pursued by the wolves or seeking refuge. Her mind worked tirelessly, interpreting signs, measuring distances, and calculating probabilities. Survival in this world was not dictated solely by strength, it was intelligence, observation, and intuition that often decided life or death. The children's needs pressed in her mind, a constant rhythm of urgency against the backdrop of the silent forest. She thought of their hunger, of their fragile bodies curled against the cold, and it propelled her forward with relentless determination. Each step, each careful observation, was in service of them. She felt the cold biting at her fingers and toes, yet the sensation sharpened her awareness rather than diminished it. In this delicate interplay of discomfort and focus, she understood a fundamental truth: hardship sharpened perception, patience amplified insight, and necessity forged action. Following the tracks was not a leisurely pursuit, it was a deliberate, calculated navigation of the forest's subtle language, a practice in translating the silent signs of the natural world into practical outcomes. The snow shifted beneath her weight as she traced the faint impressions of claws and pads across frozen ground. The forest seemed to respond, each gust of wind stirring the branches and scattering the flakes in intricate patterns. Occasionally, she glimpsed the fleeting shadow of a squirrel or bird, small lives that continued despite the omnipresent struggle for survival. Wolves, however, moved with purpose beyond instinct alone, their tracks revealed direction, pause, and even hints of strategy. The mother allowed herself to imagine their hunt, reconstructing in her mind the movements of these skilled predators as they pursued prey with unerring focus. Each moment of reflection heightened her understanding, providing insight into movement, timing, and the necessary patience required to succeed. In essence, she was not simply following, she was learning, adapting, and integrating knowledge crucial to the survival of herself and her children. A subtle crunch echoed nearby, a sound different from her own careful steps. She froze, listening. The wind carried the scent of fur, of the wild, a mingling of predator and prey. Wolves were not solitary hunters in this territory, their movements were coordinated, intelligent, and adaptive. She considered the risks and the possibilities, the dangers inherent in following these tracks, and the promise that they might lead to the nourishment her children desperately needed. Her mind, honed through countless generations of ancestral experience, weighed every factor: terrain, distance, wind direction, and the likelihood of encountering prey. The snow, pristine and deceptive, revealed and concealed in equal measure. Success depended not only on endurance but on the clarity of perception, on the ability to read the faintest signs and act decisively. The trail led her to a small rise overlooking a frozen stream. From this vantage point, she observed a landscape dotted with tracks, rabbits scuttling to safety, deer cautiously crossing open spaces, and the unmistakable marks of wolves, deliberate and confident in their path. She crouched low, letting the cold seep into her bones, observing the scene as both participant and observer. The forest was alive with patterns, connections, and movements that demanded interpretation. Following the wolves was not simply physical movement, it was a mental exercise, a mapping of life and survival in real time. She noted the direction of the sun, the position of the shadows, and the subtle changes in snow texture that indicated recent passage. Each observation informed her next steps, guiding her toward sustenance while keeping her children's safety as the guiding principle. Her focus remained unwavering, though her body ached and hunger gnawed relentlessly. Every ounce of energy was directed toward tracking, interpreting, and moving with precision. She understood that failure carried grave consequences: an empty stomach, her children's suffering, and the potential threat of predators closer to her hidden shelter. Yet in this relentless pursuit, there was also a quiet beauty, a meditation on the interconnectedness of life. Wolves, prey, and humans all navigated the same frozen landscape, each guided by instinct, intelligence, and necessity. In the delicate, ephemeral patterns left in the snow, she saw the stories of countless lives, past and present, intersecting in a dance as old as time itself. There was elegance in the struggle, poetry in the pursuit, and meaning in the relentless drive to survive and provide. Finally, she approached a small clearing where the tracks converged, the snow more disturbed and churned, suggesting recent activity and the presence of prey. Her eyes narrowed, scanning every detail: broken branches, trampled underbrush, and subtle depressions in the snow that hinted at recent movement. She felt a pulse of anticipation, a mixture of caution and hope coursing through her veins. The forest was no longer merely a backdrop, it had become a partner in her journey, offering signs, tests, and opportunities in equal measure. The mother adjusted her posture, ready to proceed with careful precision, guided by the traces the wolves had left behind, moving ever closer to the sustenance that would save her children from hunger and ensure the continuity of life in a world defined by its relentless demands. The forest seemed to hold its breath as she pressed onward, each step a careful negotiation with the uneven terrain and the delicate snow beneath her feet. Shadows shifted with the slow, unrelenting motion of the sun overhead, stretching across the landscape in long, flickering patterns that danced among the trees. The mother moved like a part of the forest itself, blending into its rhythms, attuned to its subtle cues. Each shadow hinted at movement, sometimes predator, sometimes prey, and sometimes nothing at all. Yet she understood that even the smallest detail could be a guide or a warning. Her eyes traced the interplay of light and dark, noting the faint impressions left in the snow, the bend of a branch, the subtle curve of a fallen log. The world was alive with hidden signals, and she moved with the patience and reverence of one reading a sacred script written across the landscape. The distant howl of a wolf reached her ears again, resonating through the silent forest like a call to vigilance. She paused, letting the sound echo around her, mapping its origin against the terrain. Wolves moved with intention, and she followed not to confront, but to understand, to learn, and to benefit from their knowledge. Their shadows intertwined with hers in the early light, elusive yet guiding, hinting at the paths she might take and the strategies she might employ. Her own shadow stretched long and wavering across the snow, a silent companion tracing her journey, a reminder of her presence in this vast, ancient wilderness. The forest itself seemed to respond, as if aware of her focus, presenting obstacles and openings in equal measure. Every step was a dialogue with the unseen, every movement a negotiation between caution and necessity. Her breath formed small clouds in the crisp air, each exhale a reminder of her vulnerability, yet also a testament to her resilience. Hunger gnawed at her ribs, a persistent ache that pushed her forward with urgency. Every movement carried purpose, and yet there was also space for observation, for reflection. She noted the way sunlight illuminated certain tracks while casting others into obscurity, creating a shifting map of opportunity and risk. The faint scent of prey lingered in the air, carried on the wind and mingling with the earthy aroma of damp soil and decaying leaves. Wolves had passed this way recently, and the traces they left were more than mere tracks. They were lessons, hints, and invitations to participate in the intricate dance of life that governed this wilderness. As she followed the shadows, the forest revealed its hidden complexities. A fallen tree created a natural bridge over a small ravine, its bark slick with frost, challenging her balance and forcing her to move with deliberate care. A sudden rustle in the underbrush signaled a small creature fleeing, perhaps unaware of her presence, yet its movement reinforced the interconnectedness of life around her. Each element, each shift in light or sound, was a data point in a larger equation of survival. The mother's mind worked tirelessly, processing information, predicting movement, and aligning her path with both caution and purpose. In this pursuit, she was not merely tracking, she was learning the forest, interpreting its hidden rhythms, and integrating this knowledge into her strategy to sustain her children. The shadows themselves became more than a visual phenomenon, they were markers of time, movement, and potential danger. As the sun rose higher, the interplay of light and shade shifted, revealing and concealing in equal measure. She adjusted her position frequently, sometimes advancing with stealth, other times pausing to observe, to listen, to inhale the subtle messages carried by the wind. The wolf's presence, inferred from tracks and echoed howls, guided her, but did not dictate her movements. She maintained autonomy, combining instinct with observation, knowledge with intuition. Each decision required focus, precision, and a deep understanding of the forest as both obstacle and ally. Her body moved with a rhythm honed by necessity. Knees bent, arms extended for balance, fingers brushing lightly against ferns and branches as she navigated uneven ground. Every motion was purposeful, conserving energy while maximizing observation. Hunger sharpened her awareness rather than dulling it, each ache reminded her of urgency, of responsibility, of the lives depending on her success. She imagined her children, their small hands and curious eyes, and the thought propelled her forward with renewed determination. Their survival was intertwined with her vigilance, her ability to read the forest, and her capacity to act decisively when opportunity presented itself. The trail led her through a series of natural corridors, narrow gaps between trees, low-hanging branches forming archways, and clusters of bushes that provided concealment. The shadows danced across the snow, shifting with the subtle sway of branches and the slow advance of the sun. In these patterns, she found guidance, cues that suggested direction and potential prey. Wolves had moved with precision, and by following these patterns, she could anticipate movement, predict behavior, and align herself with the natural flow of the forest. This was not a passive pursuit, it was an active engagement, a dialogue in which every choice influenced the outcome. She learned to move with patience, to wait for openings, and to interpret the forest as a living, responsive entity. Time seemed both suspended and accelerated as she followed the elusive tracks. The forest was a theater of life, a choreography of shadow and light, predator and prey, motion and stillness. She felt the tension of possibility in every step, the potential for nourishment, the risk of confrontation, the exhilaration of observation. Each moment was a blend of fear and awe, an intricate interplay that sharpened her senses and honed her understanding of the wilderness. Shadows became more than visual phenomena, they were indicators of movement, markers of safety and danger, and silent teachers revealing the structure of the forest. By following them, she was aligning herself with the deeper rhythms of life, connecting with both the wolves and the world they inhabited. Eventually, the trail led to a small clearing where shadows pooled and shifted, forming a mosaic of light and dark across the snow. Here, the mother paused, crouching low, eyes scanning for movement, ears straining for sound. The wind carried distant scents, fur, foliage, and the subtle tang of predators marking their domain. Every detail mattered, the angle of a branch, the depth of a paw print, the faint shimmer of disturbed snow. She read these signs with meticulous care, translating the forest's language into strategy, preparation, and action. Her body, mind, and instincts operated in unison, a culmination of generations of adaptation, honed intelligence, and primal necessity. The shadows guided her still, whispering secrets of survival, opportunity, and the delicate balance between life and hunger. In that clearing, she allowed herself a brief moment to observe the forest in its entirety. The snow reflected sunlight in dazzling brilliance, the trees swayed gently with the wind, and the distant call of a wolf reminded her of the hidden dynamics that governed this land. She understood that she was part of a continuum, a thread in the intricate tapestry of life that wove together predator, prey, and observer. The shadows, fleeting and mutable, had guided her this far, and she knew they would continue to offer guidance if she remained attentive, patient, and respectful. Every step forward was both a continuation of the chase and a meditation on the interwoven forces of survival, instinct, and love that defined her existence and the fragile lives of her children waiting in the hidden thicket. The cold gnawed at her body, seeping into her muscles and joints, a persistent reminder of the price exacted by survival in this unforgiving wilderness. Hunger had grown sharper, twisting in her stomach with each cautious step, demanding attention and action. Yet, for all the ache that pressed against her, it was not her own need that dominated her thoughts, it was the hunger of her children, curled in the hidden thicket, small and vulnerable, entirely dependent on her ability to endure. Every pang she felt was doubled in significance, transformed by responsibility, by love, by the primal understanding that her body, her mind, and her skill were the thin line separating life from death for those she carried within her heart. In this awareness, discomfort became fuel, pain became clarity, and hunger became both a guide and a motivator. Her eyes scanned the forest with unwavering intensity. The snow glistened beneath a cold sun, revealing subtle impressions, tiny disturbances that hinted at recent passage. Perhaps a deer had hopped across the clearing, or a hare had darted for cover. Every sign was a potential lifeline, a clue that might lead her to nourishment for her children. She crouched low, hands brushing over the snow to feel faint indentations, to trace the path of claws and hooves, translating nature's hidden messages into survival strategies. The forest, silent and watchful, seemed to respond to her determination. A fallen branch snapped somewhere in the distance, a deer's startled leap echoed through the trees, and the wind shifted, carrying with it the scent of animals, damp earth, and a faint trace of predator. Every sense was alert, every nerve taut, every heartbeat in rhythm with the demands of hunger and survival. Her mind wandered to thoughts of sacrifice, to the generations of mothers before her who had endured the same relentless tension between personal need and the needs of offspring. In their footsteps, she recognized the strength and courage necessary to persist, to confront pain, and to embrace the unknown with cautious resolve. Survival was not merely a physical endeavor, it was a moral and emotional one, a negotiation between instinct, intellect, and the deep, ancient impulse to protect life. The forest itself seemed to mirror this challenge, offering obstacles and opportunities in equal measure, frozen streams that required careful crossing, icy slopes that demanded balance, dense thickets that slowed progress but provided cover. Each barrier was a test of endurance, patience, and judgment. She understood that every decision could carry consequences, and that the stakes were not abstract, they were life itself, pressing upon her with a weight both tangible and spiritual. The pangs of hunger sharpened her awareness, refining her senses in a way only need can. Her nostrils flared to catch every scent carried by the cold wind, her eyes swept the snow with meticulous attention, detecting the faintest disturbance that might indicate movement, her ears tuned to the slightest sound, a rustle, a snap, a distant call, that could hint at opportunity or danger. Hunger was a cruel teacher, yet an effective one, compelling focus, sharpening perception, and reinforcing the urgency of action. She moved with careful precision, conserving energy while maximizing observation, guided by both instinct and reason. Every step was a negotiation with her surroundings, a balance between speed and stealth, urgency and patience. The forest was alive, and she was its participant, reading its signs, interpreting its language, and moving in accordance with the wisdom embedded in its frozen, silent beauty. The mother's thoughts returned, unbidden, to her children. Their small forms, hidden beneath the protective cover of the underbrush, embodied vulnerability, hope, and the promise of continuity. She imagined their tiny hands, the softness of their cheeks, the fragile rhythm of their breathing. Every ache in her body was amplified by their dependence. Hunger was no longer merely a physical sensation, it was an emotional and philosophical weight, a reminder of the responsibilities that defined her existence. She reflected on the magnitude of sacrifice inherent in motherhood, on the quiet, relentless courage required to place another's needs above one's own. Each moment of pain, each shiver, each skipped meal was invested in the preservation of life, in the transmission of survival, in the unbroken chain of care that connected generations. She followed a subtle incline, noticing the disturbed snow that hinted at recent passage. A fox had crossed here, perhaps in search of its own sustenance, leaving traces that were simultaneously warning and guide. The mother studied the tracks, measuring distances, noting angles, considering patterns. This was no simple observation, it was analysis, deduction, and adaptation, all driven by hunger, urgency, and necessity. The forest provided information, but it required interpretation, intelligence, and careful judgment to transform those signs into actionable strategy. Her body moved with purpose, muscles taut, breath steady, balancing the demands of stealth with the need for efficiency. Every step brought her closer to potential prey, closer to the nourishment that would sustain her children, and closer to the fulfillment of a task that demanded courage, ingenuity, and endurance. The snow deepened in patches, forcing her to adjust her movement and expenditure of energy. Her fingers were numb, her cheeks raw from cold wind, and yet she persisted, driven by an unwavering determination that seemed to rise above her own discomfort. Hunger had sharpened her resolve rather than diminishing it, transforming pain into clarity, weakness into opportunity, fatigue into focus. Every imprint in the snow became a puzzle to solve, every trace a signpost guiding her forward. Her instincts, honed over countless generations, combined with careful observation, creating a dynamic intelligence attuned to both danger and reward. In this delicate interplay, she became both hunter and scholar, interpreter and strategist, guided simultaneously by necessity, love, and the ever-present threat of scarcity. A faint scent of prey carried on the wind, mingling with the crisp aroma of pine and wet earth. She paused, inhaling deeply, letting the signals fill her mind and body. Hunger roared in her stomach, a relentless reminder of urgency, yet her attention was divided between self and children, between immediate need and ultimate purpose. Sacrifice was not abstract, it was physical, mental, and spiritual. Each aching limb, each shiver, each gnawing pang was an investment in life, in continuity, in the preservation of something far greater than herself. The forest had become a crucible, refining courage, honing intelligence, and shaping determination. She understood, with profound clarity, that her actions in these frozen woods would ripple outward, determining the survival of the next generation, shaping the story of life that stretched beyond the immediate struggle. The path led her to a small ridge, offering a vantage point from which the surrounding forest could be surveyed. Sunlight glinted off icy surfaces, casting reflective beams that illuminated subtle tracks previously hidden. Wolves had passed here, their presence marked in precise paw prints and displaced snow, moving with purpose and coordination. The mother crouched low, adjusting her posture to remain hidden while interpreting the evidence before her. Each movement, each observation, each decision was informed by hunger, necessity, and sacrifice. She understood the duality of her journey. She was driven by the primal need to feed her children, yet guided by the intelligence, observation, and patience that distinguished human survival from mere instinct. Hunger and sacrifice were intertwined, inseparable forces that propelled her forward with unwavering resolve. Time passed in measured rhythm, each breath, step, and glance aligned with the relentless pursuit of sustenance. Her eyes scanned the forest with unwavering intensity, every detail a potential key to success. Shadows shifted, snow sparkled, and the wind carried faint signals from the hidden lives of forest creatures. Hunger pressed relentlessly, yet so did determination, love, and purpose. She understood the magnitude of her task, the demands of survival, and the weight of responsibility. Every sacrifice she endured, every discomfort she tolerated, every ounce of energy she expended was invested in the preservation of life, in the continuation of lineage, and in the eternal rhythm of survival that had defined human existence for generations. In this frozen forest, amid snow and shadows, hunger and sacrifice had become one, guiding her through the wilderness toward the promise of nourishment and the assurance of her children's survival. The mother moved with quiet reverence, each step deliberate, attuned to the forest's subtle language. Wolves had become more than distant figures of danger, they were teachers, guides whose patterns and instincts carried lessons written over countless generations. Their paw prints, pressed into snow and softened earth, traced paths of survival, patience, and strategy. Following them was not merely an act of necessity, it was an immersion in a silent curriculum, one where observation replaced words and instinct supplanted theory. She studied the spacing of their prints, the direction of their movement, and the faintly disturbed foliage nearby. These were the notes of a lesson, composed in living ink upon the canvas of the wilderness, each line an invitation to understand the rhythms of life that transcended human design. The forest responded to her careful attention, as though acknowledging her presence and her purpose. Sunlight filtered through dense branches, illuminating the frost on leaves, glinting against ice, and casting the wolves' tracks into sharp relief. Each detail became a teacher in miniature, the break of a branch suggesting weight, the direction of a paw print indicating speed, the faint drag of claws hinting at behavior. She allowed herself a moment to absorb these signals, to internalize the subtle wisdom embedded in every mark. Wolves were efficient, strategic, and purposeful, their movements reflected an intelligence rooted in experience and instinct. By following them, she was learning not just about survival, but about observation, patience, and the deeper understanding of a world that demanded attention and respect. Her mind traced the possible pathways of the wolves, reconstructing their hunts with careful imagination. Perhaps they had pursued a deer, marking its flight with precision, anticipating movement and adjusting strategy. Perhaps they had paused to communicate with one another, to signal territory, or to coordinate as a pack. These moments, invisible yet palpable, became a living classroom. The mother studied the tracks with meticulous care, interpreting the gaps, the overlaps, and the direction of force. Each observation carried dual purpose, it could guide her toward food for her children, and it could teach her a method, a rhythm, a technique that would sharpen her skills for future survival. In this way, wolves served as both challenge and mentor, their presence shaping her understanding of the forest and her role within it. The children's faces flashed in her mind, small and trusting, asleep in the thicket. Every lesson gleaned from the wolves was, in essence, an investment in their lives. Her actions, guided by instinct and knowledge, were designed to bridge the fragile gap between hunger and nourishment. The forest, in its vastness and complexity, provided the opportunity, but only her intelligence, patience, and careful study could transform chance into sustenance. She moved slowly, adjusting her pace to match the rhythm suggested by the tracks, pausing to observe minor details that might have been missed at a quicker stride. Wolves, in their silent, deliberate movement, demonstrated the value of attention, discipline, and responsiveness, qualities that she absorbed and translated into her own actions. A sudden rustle in the underbrush caught her attention, and she froze, allowing her body to merge with the forest's stillness. The wolf's trail, while invisible in motion, carried lessons in timing, precision, and calculation. Their intelligence lay not just in physical capability but in the ability to read the environment, to adapt to obstacles, and to predict the behavior of other creatures. She noted the subtle changes in snow compression, the angled drag of a paw, the direction of fallen leaves, all hints of calculation, strategy, and rhythm. Observing these details, she began to internalize a method of movement and thought that balanced caution with action. Wolves were not merely guides, they were models of efficiency, adaptability, and purposeful intelligence, teaching without words, instructing through presence. The wind shifted, carrying scents and sounds that further enriched her understanding. She inhaled deeply, parsing multiple layers of information, the earthy tang of wet soil, the musky trace of predator, the faint aroma of potential prey. Wolves interpreted these signals instinctively, integrating sensory input into immediate decisions. She, too, was learning to do the same, translating scent, sight, and sound into actionable knowledge. The forest became a complex, interactive classroom, with wolves as its master instructors. Every detail demanded interpretation, every movement required adjustment, and every step could yield insight, sustenance, or danger. The balance between patience and action, observation and movement, became increasingly clear with each following step, each careful interpretation of subtle signs. Her journey brought her to a slight incline overlooking a frozen stream. The sunlight glinted off the ice, revealing subtle tracks that had been hidden in shadow. Wolves had crossed here, and the evidence of their passage offered both guidance and teaching. She crouched low, analyzing the path, understanding the strategy embedded in the prints. Their efficiency in navigating obstacles, avoiding unnecessary risk, and maintaining momentum impressed her, yet it also educated her in methods of survival. She could learn to move with similar intention, to conserve energy while maximizing results, to balance urgency with patience, and to translate observation into action. The lessons were silent but profound, etched into the forest floor and whispered through the wind. The mother's body and mind synchronized with the rhythms of the wolves, guided by instinct, observation, and inherited wisdom. Each decision was informed by their silent example, how to step lightly, how to anticipate, how to read the signs of life and danger intertwined in the landscape. Her hunger, though ever present, became a secondary force to the driving need to understand and act. The wolves' patterns offered both risk and reward, danger and knowledge, and by following them, she navigated the forest with a heightened sense of awareness. Every print became a teacher, every shadow a guide, every pause a moment of reflection. In this interplay, she internalized strategies that transcended immediate necessity, developing skills and insight that would serve her for a lifetime and, through her children, beyond. A distant howl punctuated the stillness, resonating through the trees and the snow, an auditory reminder of the wolves' presence, coordination, and purpose. It was both warning and lesson, a signal that guided her understanding of territory, movement, and relational dynamics in the wilderness. She adjusted her position, following the cues embedded in both sound and sight, translating instinct into action, observation into knowledge. The forest had become a living classroom, and she, the devoted student, absorbed its lessons through every sense, every step, and every heartbeat. Hunger and responsibility sharpened her cognition, heightening her capacity to learn and adapt. In this space, survival and education were inseparable, intertwined in a dance that demanded focus, reverence, and courage. The children's dependence remained a central compass for her actions. Each insight gained from the wolves, each subtle observation of tracks and shadows, was a contribution to their well-being. Her journey was not merely one of personal survival but of stewardship, translating silent instruction from predator to provider. Wolves taught without words but with precision, offering a mirror in which she could reflect, adapt, and act. Every movement became a lesson in balance, patience, and intelligence, every observation an insight into the broader patterns of life, risk, and sustenance. The forest, the snow, and the wolves collectively shaped her understanding, guiding her toward the nourishment her children so desperately required. In the echoes of howls, the impressions in snow, and the shifting shadows, she found guidance, inspiration, and education, all intertwined with the relentless rhythm of survival. By mid-morning, she had absorbed countless lessons, her senses sharpened, her body and mind aligned with the forest's rhythms. The wolves had become more than mere guides, they were mentors, instructors in the art of survival, demonstrating patience, strategy, and adaptability with every step. Her hunger persisted, her body a constant reminder of physical need, yet the knowledge she gleaned became a treasure, equipping her to navigate the wilderness with skill and awareness. Every track she followed, every shadow she interpreted, every sound she analyzed, reinforced the inseparable connection between observation, action, and survival. Wolves, silent yet eloquent, had taught her to read the forest not just as a place of danger, but as a living, breathing classroom where every detail mattered and every moment carried meaning. The mother moved with cautious purpose, guided by instinct, observation, and the faint trail left by the wolves. Hunger pressed relentlessly against her, each step a reminder of the urgency that defined her journey. The snow, now slightly crusted from the morning sun, bore the evidence of movement, faint tracks, scattered leaves, broken twigs. She paused frequently, scanning the forest for signs of life, for movement that might indicate the presence of prey. Her breath misted in the cold air, each exhale a visible marker of the effort required to maintain warmth and focus. Every muscle in her body was taut, responsive, prepared for the suddenness of action. The forest, alive with subtle sounds and signals, held both promise and peril in equal measure. Her goal, simple in conception but profound in consequence, was survival, hers and that of her children. She crouched low beside a fallen tree, observing a small clearing ahead. Tracks converged there, the prints of deer mingled with the paw marks of wolves, layered upon the snow like a complex map of pursuit and evasion. Her pulse quickened. Here was the culmination of observation, patience, and careful navigation, the intersection of predator and prey. The wolves had moved with precision, driving the animals toward opportunity without unnecessary risk. The mother understood the lesson embedded in their strategy: success depended not solely on strength, but on timing, positioning, and an understanding of the natural behavior of the quarry. She adjusted her stance, measuring wind direction, distance, and cover, preparing herself for the pivotal moment when observation would give way to action. Every detail mattered. The slight disturbance of snow beneath a bush suggested a hiding deer. The angle of a branch broken by passage revealed movement that might otherwise have gone unnoticed. Her mind raced through calculations: how to approach, when to strike, how to conserve energy while maximizing effectiveness. Hunger gnawed at her belly, but it also sharpened her senses, lending urgency and clarity to her thoughts. She drew on ancestral memory, intuition passed down through generations, guiding her hands, feet, and eyes in perfect alignment with the demands of the moment. The forest, silent and watchful, became a theater of life, where knowledge, instinct, and patience converged to shape destiny. A sudden flicker of movement caught her eye. A young deer, unaware of her presence, stepped into the clearing. Its coat glimmered with frost, muscles tensed for flight, eyes wide with alertness. Her body froze instinctively, muscles coiling, heartbeat steadying as she gauged distance, wind, and opportunity. The first kill was never merely a physical act, it was a culmination of observation, timing, and respect. To act too soon was to risk failure, to hesitate was to allow the prey to escape, leaving hunger unassuaged and her children at risk. She drew a slow breath, centering herself, aligning mind and body with the lessons she had gleaned from the wolves. Patience, precision, and courage became her tools, guiding her through the delicate threshold between predator and prey. The deer shifted again, grazing unconsciously, oblivious to the careful calculation unfolding in her mind. She noted its movements, predicting steps, considering obstacles, and identifying potential angles of approach. The forest around her seemed to hold its breath. Even the wind, which carried both scent and sound, became a factor to be managed. Every leaf, every twig, every shifting shadow contributed to the tapestry of possibility. She advanced slowly, silently, using cover to mask her presence while keeping the target in sight. Instinct and reason worked together seamlessly, experience and inherited wisdom converged with the immediacy of the moment. Her body moved as one with the environment, a conduit of patience, precision, and survival. As she neared, she saw subtle signs that the deer was beginning to sense danger, ears flicking, muscles twitching, nostrils flaring. Her heart pounded in rhythm with hers, yet she maintained calm, focusing on breath, balance, and timing. The first kill was not a matter of brute force but of intimate understanding, of the animal, the terrain, the environment, and the flow of movement dictated by nature itself. She crouched lower, positioning herself behind cover, allowing instinct to guide the final steps. Hunger pressed, yes, but not recklessly. Restraint and calculation were more valuable than speed or aggression. She remembered the lessons of the wolves: patience, observation, adaptation, and respect for the prey. Each of these principles converged as she readied herself. The deer took a cautious step forward, unaware of the precise alignment that had been achieved by her patience. Her muscles tensed, the culmination of careful planning and instinct honed over hours of observation. She exhaled slowly, synchronizing movement with breath, mind with body, presence with purpose. The forest seemed to fade into silence, leaving only the focus on the delicate balance between opportunity and action. This was the moment that separated survival from failure, the instant where knowledge and instinct crystallized into tangible result. She adjusted her grip on the crude tool she carried, focusing on trajectory, strength, and precision. Every decision counted, every fraction of a second could determine success or loss. In a swift, fluid motion, honed by practice, observation, and necessity, she acted. The strike was precise, deliberate, informed by hours of study and the silent guidance of the wolves she had followed. The deer faltered, then fell, its life ending abruptly, yet she felt no triumph, only the solemn recognition of the cycle of life, the weight of responsibility, and the necessity that drove her actions. Hunger, patience, courage, and understanding had converged into this moment, yielding the first tangible result of her journey. The forest seemed to exhale, the tension dissipating as the immediate need had been met, and a sense of accomplishment mingled with solemnity settled over her. She approached the fallen deer with reverence, her hands tracing the contours of its body, acknowledging the life that would sustain hers and her children's. Survival demanded respect, and she honored that principle, reflecting on the lessons embedded in every heartbeat, every movement, and every instinct that had brought her to this point. The forest, once again, offered both challenge and reward, teaching patience, timing, and the delicate art of action guided by observation. The first kill was more than sustenance, it was a confirmation of learning, a tangible result of patience, courage, and understanding. She prepared to carry the fruits of her effort back to her children, mindful of every step, aware of every shadow, and guided by the silent instruction of the forest and the wolves that had shown her the way. With the first kill secured, a mix of relief and continued vigilance settled over her. Hunger had been addressed, but danger remained. Predators lurked, and the forest required constant attention, observation, and adaptability. She moved carefully, balancing the immediate task of transporting food with the ongoing demands of survival. Each step forward reinforced the lessons she had absorbed from both her own experience and the silent teachings of the wolves: patience, observation, respect, and precision. Her children, waiting in the hidden thicket, would soon benefit from her perseverance, yet the forest continued to teach, reminding her that survival was not a single moment, but an ongoing dialogue with life, instinct, and the unyielding rhythms of the natural world. The forest seemed different now, bathed in the softer glow of late morning light, yet every detail demanded her attention as she began the long trek back to her hidden children. The first kill, now secured, weighed heavily in her arms, a tangible reminder of both success and responsibility. Every step was deliberate, careful, measured against the uneven terrain and the subtle risks that remained in the wilderness. The snow, disturbed by her earlier passage and the movement of the deer, reflected sunlight in dazzling patterns, masking tracks but also drawing attention in unexpected ways. She moved with heightened awareness, knowing that the forest, while offering sustenance, also held threats in every shadow, rustle, and gust of wind. The weight of the kill shifted as she adjusted her grip, muscles straining under the physical burden. Hunger had driven her forward with relentless urgency, yet now, the balance of movement and caution became paramount. The forest's hidden dangers, the silent predatory eyes, the snapping of brittle branches, the subtle change in snow texture, demanded vigilance. Her mind worked tirelessly, calculating the safest path, predicting potential encounters, and using every sense to anticipate obstacles. Even fatigue could not compromise attention. Every misstep could endanger her children's sustenance and her own survival. The journey back was a test of endurance, patience, and careful judgment, requiring both strength and intelligence in equal measure. The shadows lengthened as the sun shifted, weaving intricate patterns across the snow-laden landscape. She moved with a fluid, careful rhythm, letting instinct and observation guide her steps. Every twig that snapped, every faint movement in the underbrush, demanded immediate assessment. Wolves, though distant now, had taught her the value of reading signs and adjusting behavior accordingly. She crouched and paused frequently, eyes sweeping the forest floor, noting the slightest disturbance. Even the wind carried lessons, whispering subtle hints about approaching danger or opportunity. Survival depended not only on reaching her destination but on preserving the integrity of her hard-won prize. The journey back was as much a challenge of intellect as of physical endurance. Her thoughts returned to her children, and the urgency within her pressed ever stronger. Their small bodies, curled beneath layers of foliage, represented hope, continuity, and the reason for every hardship she had endured. Hunger had transformed into responsibility, pain into purpose, and fatigue into focused determination. The weight of the deer in her arms was both literal and symbolic, a testament to her success, a burden of life preserved for the fragile lives that depended entirely on her. Each careful step, each measured breath, reinforced the connection between mother and child, between sacrifice and survival. The forest, silent and indifferent, had provided opportunity, yet it was her intelligence, courage, and endurance that transformed that opportunity into sustenance. The trail back was not a simple reversal of her initial path. The forest had shifted with the passage of wind, sun, and time, creating subtle obstacles and altering the clarity of previous tracks. She adjusted constantly, reading the environment, selecting safer routes, and using cover effectively to avoid potential predators. Her senses remained alert to every detail, the compression of snow beneath branches, the direction of fallen leaves, the faint scent of animals nearby. Wolves had taught her that vigilance and adaptability were as critical as strength, and she incorporated these lessons in every movement. The journey became a dynamic negotiation with the forest, requiring patience, strategy, and continuous interpretation of subtle signals. She was not merely moving, she was navigating a complex system of risk and reward. Occasionally, the rustle of distant movement made her pause, listening intently. The forest was alive with creatures that moved with purpose, each contributing to the intricate balance of predator and prey. The mother's awareness extended beyond the immediate, integrating signals from the environment into an ongoing assessment of potential threats. She imagined the wolf's strategies, translating observed patterns into her own careful navigation. Every snapped twig, every displaced patch of snow became data, informing decisions about pace, cover, and timing. Hunger had driven her forward initially, but now, intelligence and caution became the guiding forces, ensuring that her hard-won sustenance would reach its intended recipient safely. The sun climbed higher, illuminating the forest with sharp clarity, yet even light revealed hidden challenges. Ice patches, uneven terrain, and fragile snow bridges demanded deliberate movement. She shifted her weight carefully, using every muscle to maintain balance, keeping the deer steady and minimizing disturbance that might attract attention. Fatigue pressed upon her with increasing intensity, but the thought of her children, waiting silently in the hidden thicket, supplied renewed determination. Every step forward was both a physical act and a philosophical exercise, a demonstration of endurance, focus, and unwavering commitment to the life she carried with her in purpose as well as responsibility. As she moved, the forest seemed to narrate a story of interconnection, cycles, and continuity. Tracks of smaller animals crisscrossed hers, layered upon those of the wolves, revealing the constant dance of life and survival. She reflected on her own journey, understanding that she was both participant and observer, hunter and learner, protector and nurturer. Each observation reinforced lessons learned, the value of patience, the importance of caution, and the necessity of precise, deliberate action. Wolves had shown her strategy, the forest itself provided opportunity, and her own endurance, intelligence, and courage translated these into survival for her children. The return journey was a continuum of learning, reflection, and purpose, where each element of the environment contributed to knowledge and safety. Occasionally, she had to pause to rest, sitting on fallen logs or crouching behind rocks, catching her breath while keeping watch. Her body, weary from exertion and hunger, reminded her of its limits, yet determination overrode discomfort. She used these pauses not only for rest but to scan the surroundings, interpret subtle shifts, and plan subsequent movements. Every detail mattered, the angle of shadows, the consistency of snow, the faint scent of approaching wildlife. Wolves had taught that success often relied on patience as much as action, and she applied this principle relentlessly. Her children's survival demanded nothing less than full attentiveness, measured calculation, and disciplined endurance. Each pause became an opportunity to reinforce lessons, consolidate understanding, and prepare for the challenges ahead. The final stretch approached as familiar landmarks began to emerge, dense thickets, a cluster of large rocks, and a partially frozen stream that had marked the path to their hidden shelter. Relief mingled with vigilance, success had been hard-earned, yet danger remained. She navigated carefully, adjusting her path to account for new obstacles, ensuring that every step preserved both her safety and the integrity of the kill. Snow sparkled in shifting patterns, shadows lengthened, and the forest maintained its silent watch. Her connection with the environment deepened, as if each observation, movement, and breath were recorded by the very land around her. The journey back, though fraught with risk, had become a testament to resilience, observation, and the enduring power of maternal love. Finally, she emerged near the hidden thicket where her children waited. Her breath came in heavy but controlled gasps, body aching from exertion, yet mind alert and focused. The forest behind her seemed both expansive and intimate, a living testament to survival, learning, and adaptation. Every lesson from the wolves, every observation from the snow-laden terrain, every adjustment in balance and pace had culminated in this moment. The return journey was more than a physical feat, it was a demonstration of intelligence, endurance, and the unbroken chain of care that linked generations. With the kill secured, she approached her children, ready to provide nourishment and reassurance, a living embodiment of sacrifice, perseverance, and the enduring bond of life and love. Emerging from the dense forest into the hidden thicket, the mother felt a wave of relief tempered by exhaustion. The familiar scent of her children reached her first, a blend of warmth, sweat, and the subtle tang of their small bodies nestled in the protective underbrush. Their eyes, wide with both anticipation and hunger, locked onto hers the instant they noticed her presence. Time seemed to stretch and condense all at once, hours of struggle, observation, and survival converged into this single, potent moment. She knelt low, setting the first kill carefully on the snow-dusted ground, her hands still trembling from exertion, fatigue, and the deep, almost sacred weight of responsibility. Every sense remained heightened, yet a profound calm washed over her. She had arrived, and her children were safe. The children's small faces lit up as they scrambled forward, their limbs clumsy but determined, driven by the primal urgency of hunger. She watched, a mixture of pride, love, and relief swelling within her, as their tiny hands reached toward the kill. The forest around them seemed to recede, the shadows softening, the cold tempered by the warmth of this reunion. In the fleeting moment before sustenance was delivered, she observed them closely, the rise and fall of their chests, the curious sparkle in their eyes, the way they tentatively tested the snow beneath their fingers. Each detail was a reminder of the fragility of life, the responsibility she carried, and the profound significance of her journey. Their survival depended entirely on her choices, and now, having succeeded, she allowed herself the briefest moment of quiet reflection. The first bites were hesitant, careful, yet immediate. Hunger drove urgency, but curiosity tempered it, as the children explored the texture, scent, and taste of the food. The mother watched intently, ensuring that each child received a portion sufficient to sustain their fragile bodies. She guided their hands, correcting overzealous attempts, distributing carefully, and maintaining control over the precious resource she had secured. Every gesture reflected both tenderness and authority, balancing nurturing with the imperative to preserve life. This was more than feeding, it was a transmission of care, discipline, and awareness. The act of sustenance carried lessons beyond mere nutrition, patience, appreciation, and understanding of the effort required to transform the forest's bounty into survival. As they ate, she allowed herself a moment to reflect on the journey that had brought them here. The snow-laden forest, the wolves' silent guidance, the careful tracking of prey, all of it had led to this moment. Her mind wandered briefly to the wolves, those teachers who had imparted lessons in patience, observation, and strategy without a single sound. Their presence had shaped her path, influencing every decision and movement, and ultimately securing the means to feed her children. In the delicate balance of predator, prey, and human observer, she had found understanding, timing, and insight. Each bite taken by her children was a confirmation of the lessons learned, a tangible reward for her endurance, and an affirmation of her ability to navigate the complexities of survival. The forest around them seemed to settle into a gentle rhythm, the wind softening, shadows shifting subtly, and sunlight filtering through the trees to create pockets of warmth. It was as though the wilderness itself acknowledged the conclusion of her journey, granting a rare moment of respite. She remained vigilant, however, knowing that danger had not vanished entirely. Predators, both large and small, still roamed the forest, and the children's vulnerability demanded continued awareness. Yet, within this caution, there was space for quiet celebration, for the recognition of accomplishment, and for the profound emotional connection that defined her role as mother and protector. Every sense remained alert, but her heart allowed itself a measure of relief, gratitude, and deep, resonant satisfaction. The children, their hunger sated, began to explore cautiously, their small movements imbued with both curiosity and newfound energy. She observed them, marveling at their resilience, adaptability, and the small, instinctive behaviors that reflected both inheritance and environment. Their hands touched the snow, their eyes followed the flight of birds, and their ears perked at the faintest rustle in the underbrush. In their exploration, she saw echoes of herself, of generations past, and of the enduring human capacity to learn, adapt, and thrive. The reunion was not merely physical sustenance, it was a restoration of balance, a reaffirmation of her protective role, and a demonstration of the intimate bond between parent and child that shaped every decision, sacrifice, and risk undertaken. As the afternoon sun shifted, casting longer shadows across the thicket, she began to prepare for the next phase of survival. The kill would need to be portioned, preserved, and monitored to ensure it lasted as long as possible. She moved with practiced efficiency, cutting, arranging, and observing, all while keeping one eye on her children. The forest, though quieter than before, still demanded respect. She reinforced boundaries, established routines, and maintained vigilance over both the immediate environment and the precious resource she had acquired. Every motion was purposeful, blending care, strategy, and foresight. Her children watched, absorbing subtle lessons in survival, observation, and the delicate management of resources, insights that would shape their own understanding of life in the wilderness. The emotional weight of the reunion pressed upon her as well. Relief, pride, exhaustion, and love intertwined, creating a complex tapestry of feeling that echoed in every movement and thought. She knelt beside the children, smoothing hair from their faces, checking for frostbite, and whispering reassurances, even as the chill lingered in the air. Her voice, soft and deliberate, carried warmth and authority, reinforcing both emotional connection and the importance of attentiveness. This was an intimate, sacred interaction, the physical act of feeding intertwined with lessons in care, survival, and respect for the fragile balance of life. Every gesture, word, and breath contributed to the enduring bond between mother and child, a bond that transcended immediate necessity and spoke to the continuity of life itself. The children, now calm and nourished, nestled closer to her for warmth and comfort. She allowed herself a brief moment of reflection, absorbing the enormity of what had been accomplished. The forest, once a realm of uncertainty and challenge, had yielded sustenance, guidance, and opportunity. The wolves' lessons, her own endurance, and the intelligence applied throughout the journey had culminated in this reunion, transforming danger and hunger into security and nourishment. Each moment underscored the profound interconnectedness of life, the intricate balance between risk and reward, and the moral and emotional dimensions of survival. In this small clearing, amidst snow, shadows, and sunlight, the cycle of life was both fragile and resilient, demanding vigilance, wisdom, and care. The forest had quieted, the tension of pursuit replaced by a reflective stillness. The mother, sitting beside her resting children, allowed herself a rare moment to absorb the magnitude of what had transpired. The hunt, the tracking, the careful observation of wolves and the forest itself, had been more than a quest for food, it had been an education in the art of survival. Each step she had taken, each pause to observe, each calculation of distance, wind, and movement, had been imbued with lessons that transcended immediate necessity. Now, in the gentle hush of the hidden thicket, she reflected on the knowledge gained, the skills honed, and the wisdom inherited from both the wilderness and her forebears. The first lesson was patience. From the moment she had followed the wolf tracks, she understood that survival required waiting, observing, and learning to read the forest's subtle signals. Wolves moved with deliberate precision, never rushing, always attentive to the patterns of prey and predator alike. Their efficiency was not brute force, it was timing, strategy, and an acute understanding of the environment. She had mirrored their discipline, slowing her pace, analyzing signs, and resisting the urgent pull of immediate action. Patience had allowed her to identify opportunity, conserve energy, and prepare for the precise moment when action would yield the greatest reward. The forest had become a classroom in temporal awareness, where moments stretched and contracted, and only those attuned to rhythm and timing could succeed. Observation followed closely as a second critical lesson. Every footprint in the snow, every broken twig, every subtle shift in scent carried information. The forest spoke in a language of minute details, and she had learned to listen with her eyes, hands, and instincts. Wolves had demonstrated this keen awareness naturally, their movements a continuous study of the environment, anticipating prey, avoiding danger, and navigating complex terrain. By paying attention to the smallest cues, the depression of snow under weight, the direction of a branch bent by movement, or the angle of paw prints, she had developed a similar skill. Observation was not passive, it required full engagement, heightened senses, and the ability to synthesize scattered information into actionable strategy. Through it, she had seen how intelligence, focus, and attentiveness could translate the chaotic complexity of the forest into understandable patterns and paths. A third lesson emerged from the necessity of strategy and planning. Survival was never random, it was deliberate, calculated, and informed by both instinct and reasoning. The mother had learned to predict movement, anticipate behavior, and align her actions with opportunity. She understood that a misstep, a poorly timed motion, or an oversight could undo hours of effort and imperil her children. From the wolves, she had gleaned the importance of spatial awareness, cooperative behavior, and precision. Each decision, from choosing which tracks to follow, to when to advance, to how to approach her prey, was shaped by this strategic mindset. The hunt had reinforced that knowledge was only powerful when coupled with careful, deliberate application. Action without thought, like instinct without awareness, was insufficient to secure life in the wilderness. Sacrifice also became a tangible lesson during this journey. Hunger pressed constantly, cold seeped into her muscles, and exhaustion threatened to slow her progress. Yet, her focus remained on the well-being of her children. Every discomfort, every risk, every measured step was an investment in their survival. Sacrifice was not abstract, it was immediate and physical, philosophical and emotional. It demanded the suppression of personal urgency for a greater purpose, the channeling of pain into action, and the transformation of need into strategy. The forest had provided opportunity, but survival had required the willingness to endure, to place responsibility above desire, and to understand that life depended upon such choices. Through this, she internalized the profound truth that survival was an exercise not only of skill but of courage and moral commitment. Resilience, too, had been hammered into her consciousness. From the moment she set out to follow the wolf tracks, the forest tested her with uneven terrain, hidden dangers, and the relentless pull of hunger and fatigue. Each obstacle demanded adaptation, an altered step, a shift in approach, a recalibration of energy. The wolves, moving seamlessly through their environment, provided examples of endurance, persistence, and adaptability. She absorbed these lessons, learning that resilience was both physical and mental, requiring the integration of observation, strategy, and patience. The forest itself became an instructor, shaping understanding through challenge, testing resolve, and reinforcing the necessity of flexibility in thought and action. Without resilience, knowledge alone would have been insufficient. Without persistence, survival would have remained an aspiration rather than a reality. The emotional dimensions of the hunt also offered profound instruction. Fear, excitement, tension, and relief had coursed through her body, each emotion sharpening awareness and refining decision-making. She had learned to manage the dual pressures of instinctual fear and deliberate calculation, balancing the fight-or-flight response with the deliberate patience required to succeed. Each surge of adrenaline was tempered by observation, every impulse to rush tempered by strategy. Emotions, she realized, could serve survival if harnessed, interpreted, and guided with understanding. The children, reliant on her competence and composure, benefited indirectly from this mastery. Emotional regulation, like observation and strategy, became a survival skill, an internal tool as essential as any weapon or physical capability. The interconnectedness of life emerged as a subtle yet powerful lesson. Every creature, every trace, every movement in the forest participated in a delicate balance of cause and effect. Wolves guided her toward prey, prey shaped the wolves' movements, the forest dictated possibilities and constraints. She witnessed, firsthand, the intricate relationships between predator, prey, and environment. Her actions, though small in the grand scheme, reverberated within this system. Life depended on understanding patterns, respecting cycles, and acting with intelligence and caution. The hunt became a microcosm of existence itself, a philosophical lesson in the interdependence of beings, the consequences of decisions, and the delicate balance that allowed life to persist in a challenging world. Finally, the mother recognized the intangible yet profound lesson of connection, the bond between her and her children, forged through care, endurance, and courage. The hunt had been a demonstration of love, responsibility, and moral purpose. Knowledge and skill were important, but the driving force had always been the well-being of the small, trusting lives awaiting her return. This connection was both motivating and grounding, transforming fear and fatigue into determination, shaping perception and action, and providing a moral compass in the wilderness. Her children's survival depended not only on her skills but on the strength of this bond. In understanding, nurturing, and protecting it, she internalized a truth that would shape her decisions long after the hunt ended. Survival was inseparable from love, responsibility, and the recognition of life's profound interdependence. As the sun began to sink, casting long shadows across the forest floor, the mother absorbed these lessons fully, integrating them into both thought and habit. The hunt, which had begun as a physical quest for food, concluded as an education in patience, observation, strategy, sacrifice, resilience, emotional mastery, interconnectedness, and connection. Each aspect of the journey contributed to her understanding of the forest, the wolves, and the intricate demands of survival. Every breath, step, and glance had been an opportunity to learn, adapt, and prepare for future challenges. The forest had taught without words, offering guidance, insight, and instruction embedded in snow, tracks, shadows, and subtle movement. In this quiet reflection, she recognized the profound, enduring impact of the hunt, not merely the sustenance it provided, but the wisdom it imparted, shaping her as both mother and participant in the timeless rhythm of life. The forest had transformed under the heavy hand of winter, draped in a thick blanket of snow that muted sound and reshaped familiar landscapes into a world of quiet austerity. Every step the mother took was met with the crunch of frozen earth, the occasional snap of ice-laden branches, and the sharp, clean scent of cold air. The lessons of the hunt, the guidance of the wolves, and the responsibilities of motherhood had already impressed themselves upon her mind, yet winter now demanded a deeper reflection. Survival was no longer only about a single kill or immediate sustenance, it was about understanding the rhythms of the season, the endurance required to navigate the relentless cold, and the foresight needed to protect and provide for her children across the long, unforgiving months ahead. She crouched beside her children, who huddled together beneath layers of hides and dried foliage, their small forms shivering with the residual cold of the morning. Her own body ached from exertion and fatigue, muscles tense from navigating the uneven, icy terrain. Yet even in this state, her mind was alert, processing the interconnected lessons that the hunt and the forest had imparted. Winter, she realized, was not merely an external challenge, it was an instructor in patience, resilience, and the relentless assessment of risk. Every shadow in the snow, every shifting wind, every subtle disturbance in the underbrush offered information, opportunity, or threat. To survive, she needed to integrate these observations into a coherent understanding of the forest's hidden language. The first lesson winter reinforced was the value of preparation. Unlike the fleeting opportunities of a single hunt, the season demanded foresight and planning. Food caches needed to be considered, shelters evaluated for protection against wind and cold, and daily routines established to maximize safety and efficiency. She recalled the precision of the wolves, their methodical tracking, and their awareness of seasonal cycles. They had taught her that success depended not only on immediate action but on strategic planning, anticipation of environmental shifts, and the careful management of resources. Winter amplified this lesson. Failure to anticipate could result in hunger, exposure, or danger. Preparation was no longer a tool of convenience, it had become a matter of life and death. Observation remained crucial, yet its focus shifted subtly in the winter landscape. Snow both revealed and concealed, amplifying footprints while masking hidden hazards. Each track, whether left by prey, predator, or fellow humans, became a vital source of information. She studied the depth and spacing of prints, the orientation of disturbed branches, and the faint scent trails carried on the cold wind. The wolves' teachings resonated here more than ever, their instinctive mastery of the terrain now mirrored in her heightened awareness. Observation in winter required patience, interpretive skill, and the integration of multiple senses, sight, sound, and smell combined to form a comprehensive map of opportunity and threat. She had become fluent in this language, each moment of reflection sharpening her capacity to survive. Resilience emerged as a central theme of winter survival. The cold tested both body and mind, imposing exhaustion, hunger, and discomfort as constant companions. Yet these challenges offered an opportunity to develop endurance and mental fortitude. She learned to pace herself, conserving energy while remaining vigilant, and to recognize the early signs of fatigue or exposure that could jeopardize her and her children. Each exertion, each deliberate step, reinforced the understanding that survival required more than strength, it demanded adaptability, insight, and a steady integration of physical and cognitive endurance. Winter, in its starkness, was a crucible, distilling lessons in persistence and the management of both internal and external resources. The moral dimensions of survival also came into sharper focus. Each decision, where to move, when to act, how to allocate food, carried profound ethical weight. Her children depended on her wisdom and judgment, making her choices both personal and communal, individual and generational. Winter magnified the consequences of error, yet also offered opportunities for reflection on responsibility, empathy, and the enduring obligations of care. She recognized that survival was inseparable from moral discernment, action without consideration could imperil life, yet hesitation could starve it. Through this lens, she came to understand that true mastery of survival required not only skill and strength but the capacity to weigh consequence, prioritize life, and act with foresight and intentionality. The passage of days brought a contemplative rhythm to her experience. The hunt, once a singular, intense episode, now unfolded as a continuous engagement with the environment, its challenges, and the lessons it offered. She moved deliberately, each step informed by prior experience, observation, and reflection. Snowstorms, shifting ice, and the erratic behavior of prey all demanded adjustment, flexibility, and strategic recalibration. Wolves, now distant but ever present in her memory, had shown her the importance of adaptability, communication, and the subtle reading of environmental cues. Winter transformed these lessons from theory into lived reality, testing her capacity to integrate knowledge with action under pressure, in conditions that were both physically demanding and psychologically taxing. Reflection on the interconnection of life became an essential component of winter learning. She saw how each element of the forest, the wolves, the prey, the weather, and the terrain, interacted to form a complex, interdependent system. Her actions, choices, and observations existed within this network, influencing outcomes in subtle but significant ways. The forest, though silent and often unforgiving, provided continuous feedback. Successful navigation reinforced effective strategies, while mistakes highlighted vulnerabilities. By considering her place within this system, she gained a deeper understanding of survival as both ecological and philosophical endeavor. Winter, in its harshness, clarified the delicate balance of dependence, adaptation, and consequence that governed life in the wilderness. Emotion, too, took on renewed significance during these cold months. Fear, fatigue, and anxiety were ever present, yet tempered by love, determination, and the drive to ensure her children's survival. She learned to channel emotion into focus, transforming the turbulence of instinct into deliberate action. Every decision became an interplay of rational thought and emotional intelligence, where intuition complemented observation, and careful planning mitigated the risks of impulsive reaction. Her children's reliance amplified the stakes, heightening both stress and clarity, reinforcing the understanding that survival was an integration of mind, body, and heart. In this crucible of emotion, she discovered the depth of her own capacity to endure, guide, and protect. Even as winter imposed its quiet rhythm upon the forest, danger remained an ever-present companion, lurking in the shadows cast by snow-laden trees and jagged rocks. The mother, now seasoned by her journey and the lessons of the hunt, understood that survival was never guaranteed. Her senses were acutely tuned to subtle changes in the environment, the faint crunch of movement beneath snow, the distant call of an unseen predator, the sudden stillness that could signal the presence of life. Every sound, smell, and movement carried potential meaning, each a clue to safety or threat. The shadows of danger were not always visible, they were inferred, anticipated, and respected, shaping her actions and decisions at every step. She moved cautiously, glancing at the forest floor, noting footprints and disturbances in the snow that might indicate nearby predators. Wolves, deer, foxes, and larger carnivores shared this landscape, each competing for survival, each with instincts finely tuned to opportunity. She had learned from the wolves that the smallest error, misreading the terrain, underestimating an animal's perception, or failing to account for wind direction, could have fatal consequences. Even now, with her children resting in the hidden thicket, she remained vigilant, scanning the periphery for any sign of encroaching threat. The forest was a living organism, simultaneously provider and predator, and understanding its nuances was a matter of life and death. Shadows lengthened as the sun dipped lower, transforming familiar shapes into ambiguous forms. Trees twisted in the dim light, branches resembling claws reaching through the snow, creating illusions of movement that tested perception and focus. The mother moved slowly, deliberately, trusting her instincts honed over the course of the hunt and the lessons of winter. She adjusted her pace to maintain cover, slipping quietly through dense underbrush and across frozen streams. Her body was weary, but her mind remained alert, scanning for signs that might betray the presence of other hunters or predators. Awareness, she knew, had to remain continuous. Danger was patient and opportunistic, striking when vigilance faltered. The first sign of immediate threat appeared as a series of large paw prints in the fresh snow, partially obscured by drifting flakes. They were too large to be the wolves she had followed, and their spacing suggested a predator of significant size, perhaps a lynx, wolverine, or even a rogue wolf. The mother paused, evaluating distance, wind, and visibility, considering whether to continue along her planned path or to adjust her course. Each choice carried potential risk. Moving closer might bring confrontation, while retreating could cost valuable time and energy. She weighed options carefully, drawing upon her accumulated knowledge of animal behavior, terrain, and survival strategies. Every instinct converged into a singular focus: protect her children and maintain control over the outcome. Her breath formed small clouds in the cold air as she slowed further, listening intently for movement. A branch snapped somewhere behind her, subtle but distinct, and her body tensed, muscles coiled for action. She moved silently toward cover, using the natural contours of the land to shield her presence while observing the source of the sound. Predators in winter were opportunistic, drawn by weakness, scent, and the slightest disturbance. She recognized that her vigilance, patience, and careful attention were as important as any weapon or tool in ensuring survival. Each moment became a delicate negotiation with unseen forces, where perception and strategy determined whether danger would strike or pass by. The shadows seemed to move with intention, shifting with the light and the wind. Her mind calculated possibilities: predator paths, potential escape routes, safe havens, and optimal positions for observation. She knew that misjudgment could result in injury or loss, yet hesitation could also be costly. The balance between caution and necessary action was precarious, requiring constant assessment and adjustment. Wolves had demonstrated this equilibrium naturally, responding to threat and opportunity with precision. She mirrored their discipline, combining instinct, observation, and careful movement to navigate the uncertain terrain. Danger, she realized, was not an anomaly but a constant, shaping behavior, decisions, and even emotional awareness. A distant howl pierced the forest, resonating through snow-covered trees and frozen underbrush. It was a reminder of the omnipresent threat, a sound both haunting and instructive. Wolves, even distant ones, were a signal. They marked territory, communicated with packs, and influenced the movement of prey and other predators. The mother paused, interpreting its meaning in the context of her location, her children, and the potential presence of predators. Each howl, each shadow, each subtle disturbance became a lesson in vigilance, awareness, and the integration of sensory input into immediate strategy. Winter had amplified these lessons, demanding heightened attention and faster, more accurate assessments of the environment. As twilight approached, shadows deepened, and the forest transformed into a chiaroscuro of indistinct shapes and potential threats. The mother adjusted her path, moving parallel to the hidden thicket rather than directly toward it, ensuring that any predator approaching from a distance would be less likely to detect her presence. She crouched low, her movements deliberate and silent, each step calculated to avoid unnecessary sound or disturbance. Every detail mattered: the crunch of snow beneath a foot, the glint of light on ice, the reflection of moonlight on a frozen branch. Her vigilance was constant, blending observation, instinct, and strategic movement into a seamless practice of survival. Fatigue threatened to slow her, yet adrenaline and focus carried her forward. Her children's safety was paramount, and the lessons learned from the hunt and winter reflection guided every decision. Shadows of danger, while intimidating, were manageable through knowledge, patience, and careful execution. She recognized patterns, anticipated movements, and created mental maps of the terrain, aligning action with strategy. Even in moments of extreme pressure, she maintained clarity, allowing instinct and intelligence to operate in concert. Survival was both mental and physical, a continuous integration of learned skills, acute perception, and decisive execution. Finally, the hidden thicket came into view, a sanctuary amidst the ever-present threats. The shadows of danger had shaped her journey, demanding vigilance, adaptability, and deliberate action at every step. She approached cautiously, ensuring the perimeter remained secure and assessing any signs of predator activity before releasing tension. Her children, sheltered and unaware of the risks she had navigated, continued to rest, embodying the very reason for her vigilance. Shadows of danger had not vanished, they would never fully vanish, but she had learned to manage them, using skill, awareness, and patience to safeguard life in a forest governed by unpredictability and the relentless cycles of nature. After the tense navigation of shadows and the omnipresent threats that winter demanded, the forest finally offered a fleeting respite. The mother and her children sat within the sheltered thicket, the wind softened, and snowflakes drifting lazily through filtered sunlight created a momentary sense of stillness. It was a rare pause, the forest granting a breath between cycles of challenge and survival. In these moments, she allowed herself to absorb the quiet, to listen to the subtle hum of life that persisted despite the harshness of the season. Every sound, the whisper of snow against branches, the distant call of a bird, the soft rustle of her children stirring, was magnified, filling her with both awe and cautious appreciation. The calm provided an opportunity for reflection, a chance to consider lessons learned from the hunt, from the relentless winter, and from the shadows of danger that constantly accompanied them. She observed her children closely, noting their small movements, the rise and fall of their breaths, and the resilience in their energy despite cold and hunger. This stillness was not mere idle rest, it was a space for understanding, for consolidation of experience, and for preparation. The forest, though silent, continued to instruct. Its patterns, light, and subtle sounds offered insight into the passage of time, the behavior of prey and predator, and the rhythms of life that unfolded regardless of human presence. Patience became the central virtue of this period. The mother understood that survival was a combination of action and stillness, of engagement and observation. The calm between storms allowed her to internalize strategies, plan for the coming hours and days, and attune her senses to nuances that might otherwise go unnoticed in the rush of movement. The forest's quiet was deceptive, it encouraged attentiveness while hiding latent dangers. Wolves had taught her that opportunities often emerged in moments of stillness, that understanding the environment required pauses as much as pursuits. She embraced this principle fully, using the interlude to observe snow patterns, track small animal movements, and gauge changes in wind and temperature that would influence their next steps. During this pause, she also reflected on the emotional dimensions of survival. The tension and adrenaline that accompanied constant vigilance had temporarily subsided, allowing for the emergence of deeper feelings, gratitude, relief, and an almost meditative appreciation of life's fragile continuity. She recognized how closely her emotions were tied to her children's well-being, each heartbeat of theirs resonating within her own. The calm between storms was both literal and metaphorical, a moment to reconcile fear and hope, danger and security, effort and reward. She breathed slowly, matching her rhythm to the subtle movements of the forest, and allowed herself to feel the quiet dignity of life preserved through persistence, skill, and courage. The forest itself seemed to participate in this pause, revealing subtleties that had gone unnoticed during periods of urgent activity. Sunlight glinted off ice-laden branches, reflecting faint colors through the canopy, while shadows danced gently on the snow. Animal tracks, previously hidden, became clearer, offering insight into the movements of both predators and prey. She studied these traces with meticulous care, her mind cataloging, analyzing, and predicting potential outcomes. The calm provided the opportunity to synthesize information acquired during the hunt and the winter's passage into actionable knowledge. In these quiet hours, she transformed observation into understanding, turning survival into strategy, and instinct into considered skill. This interlude also reinforced the interconnectedness of life. The forest was a living system, each creature influencing another, every movement contributing to the balance of predator and prey. She observed how even the smallest actions could ripple through this network. A displaced branch could reveal a hidden track, a faint scent could alert a predator, and a moment of inattention could shift advantage. The calm between storms offered a rare chance to perceive these connections, to contemplate the consequences of her actions, and to recognize the subtle patterns that governed life in the wilderness. Through observation, she deepened her understanding of the forest not as a backdrop but as an active participant in the ongoing narrative of survival. The calm also provided space to integrate the lessons of sacrifice, resilience, and maternal responsibility. She thought of the hunt, of the sacrifices endured, and of the meticulous attention required to feed her children. Every decision carried weight, every step influenced outcomes, and every moment of care reflected profound responsibility. The interlude allowed her to reflect on the cumulative impact of these lessons, to appreciate her own endurance, and to prepare mentally for the challenges that would inevitably return. Survival was cyclical, punctuated by moments of activity and stillness alike, and she learned that wisdom came as much from reflection as from action. The calm of the forest had faded with the shifting wind, and the mother knew it was time to resume the hunt. The snow, once a soft blanket of stillness, now carried new signs of movement, footprints, broken branches, and faint scents that demanded attention. She rose carefully, stretching stiff muscles while keeping her children within view, ensuring that every movement balanced speed with stealth. Survival, she had learned, required constant engagement, periods of reflection were fleeting, and the forest offered no guarantees. Each step forward was both calculated and instinctive, a dance between knowledge and intuition honed through weeks of observation, trial, and endurance. Her eyes scanned the horizon, noting the subtle shifts in terrain that could indicate the passage of prey or the presence of predators. Wolves, though unseen, had left their mark, guiding her understanding of how creatures navigated this frozen expanse. She recalled their lessons in strategy, patience, observation, and the timing of action. Now, as she resumed her hunt, she applied these principles with meticulous care. Every footprint in the snow, every displaced twig, became data, informing the next movement, the potential ambush, and the optimal path forward. The forest demanded attention at all scales, from the smallest disturbance beneath a foot to the vast patterns of tracks stretching into the distance. The mother moved with a balance of speed and caution, aware that the lives of her children depended on her judgment. Their well-being had been secured temporarily, but the need for food and resources remained urgent. Hunger pressed, both in her body and theirs, a constant motivator and a reminder of the stakes. She assessed the landscape for signs of prey, deer tracks, rabbit burrows, or bird activity, and considered the feasibility of pursuing each. Energy expenditure had to be measured against potential reward, and risk had to be weighed carefully. The hunt was no longer a singular act but a continuum of decisions, each with immediate and long-term consequences. The air was crisp and carried faint scents, a mixture of pine, snow, and distant animal presence. She inhaled carefully, processing the information encoded in these subtle signals. Wolves had taught her to read scent as an extension of sight, to anticipate movement based on the subtlest indicators, and to align action with environmental cues. She moved slowly, bending low to the snow, tracing possible paths with her eyes, and noting disturbances that suggested prey had passed. Each observation was layered, integrated with prior knowledge, and filtered through the lens of both instinct and reasoning. The forest was alive, offering guidance and challenge simultaneously, and mastery required immersion, attention, and adaptability. As she navigated a narrow corridor between snow-covered trees, the mother spotted fresh tracks leading toward a frozen creek. Her pulse quickened with anticipation. These prints were recent, possibly minutes old, indicating prey nearby. Yet she approached cautiously, mindful that predators might follow the same signs. The delicate balance between opportunity and risk demanded precision. A misstep, a miscalculation, or excessive noise could result in failure or danger. She slowed her pace, adjusting posture, weight, and breathing, blending into the forest's rhythm. Her children remained hidden, their safety maintained by distance, concealment, and her continued vigilance. Each calculated movement reflected both strategy and maternal responsibility, demonstrating the dual focus that defined survival in this environment. The tracks led her along the creek's edge, where ice glinted under weak sunlight and snow muffled most sound. She paused frequently, observing water ripples, ice fractures, and subtle signs of prey movement. The forest seemed to hold its breath, amplifying the tension and focus of the moment. Hunger, anticipation, and the lingering lessons of winter merged into a heightened state of awareness. Wolves had shown her the power of patience, the necessity of reading every signal, and the advantage of aligning action with precise observation. The tension of the hunt culminated in a singular, decisive moment as the mother prepared to secure her first kill. The deer, grazing cautiously among the shrubs, remained oblivious to her presence, yet the slightest miscalculation could undo weeks of effort, training, and patience. Her muscles tensed, breath controlled, and senses fully engaged, she approached with the precision and awareness that had been honed through relentless observation of the forest and its inhabitants. Every step carried weight, every movement was deliberate, informed by the rhythm of the terrain, the subtle cues of the animal, and the instincts refined during her journey. The first lesson of the actual kill was the necessity of absolute focus. Distraction, hesitation, or overconfidence could jeopardize not only the hunt but the safety of her children, who relied entirely on her ability to provide. The forest, silent yet filled with subtle sound and motion, seemed to accentuate the stakes. Snowflakes drifted slowly to the ground, each one a reminder of the fragility of life and the delicate balance she navigated. She adjusted her stance, anchoring herself to the frozen earth, and became acutely aware of her own heartbeat, matching its rhythm to the quiet pulse of the forest. This alignment between body, mind, and environment was critical, for the act of taking life required not only skill but profound attentiveness. Observation became more than a survival skill, it was a moral and ethical instrument guiding her actions. Every flick of the deer's ear, every twitch of a muscle, every subtle shift in posture carried information. Wolves had demonstrated similar attentiveness, blending stealth with patience, respecting the boundaries of nature while ensuring sustenance. She mirrored this approach, waiting for the precise alignment of opportunity and readiness. Her eyes traced the path, noting potential obstacles, escape routes, and the position that would maximize efficiency while minimizing risk. Each decision was informed by layers of prior knowledge, instinctual understanding, and careful calculation. The mother recalled the lessons of patience from the hunt. Days of tracking, observation, and reflection had prepared her for this exact moment, teaching that success depended on the timing of action, not merely on effort. She remained motionless for what felt like an eternity, resisting the primal urge to rush, allowing her body and mind to synchronize with the rhythms of the forest. Every sensory input was analyzed, subtle shifts in wind direction, distant rustles, and the deer's alertness guided her movements. In this heightened state, patience became a dynamic force, channeling anticipation into precise action rather than hesitation. As she moved closer, the forest seemed to hold its breath. The snow muffled most sound, yet every step produced tiny, almost imperceptible shifts. She calculated the weight distribution of her feet, the tension in her muscles, and the trajectory that would enable a swift and humane outcome. Wolves had taught the efficiency of execution, the importance of minimizing struggle, and the ethical responsibility inherent in taking life for survival. These principles guided her, shaping her approach into one of controlled, deliberate action. The forest itself seemed to participate in this lesson, offering concealment, terrain advantages, and auditory feedback that informed every step. Finally, the moment arrived. With steady hands, clear vision, and unwavering concentration, she executed the precise movement necessary to bring down the deer. The act, though immediate, was the culmination of extensive preparation, observation, and reflection. The forest silence amplified the intensity of the moment, each heartbeat echoing against the backdrop of snow and distant trees. The deer, once a vibrant, moving presence, became still, a testament to her skill, patience, and understanding of both animal behavior and environmental dynamics. The mother allowed herself a brief pause, absorbing the gravity of her action and the responsibility it entailed. The first kill was more than a physical achievement, it was an ethical, emotional, and psychological milestone. It demonstrated mastery over survival skills, the ability to synthesize observation and instinct, and the capacity to act decisively under pressure. Wolves had shown that efficiency, patience, and respect for prey were integral to sustenance, and she had internalized these lessons fully. The act itself was swift, minimizing suffering while maximizing nourishment, reflecting both the intelligence and the moral awareness that distinguished mere hunters from those attuned to the deeper rhythms of life in the wild. After the kill, the mother turned her attention to preparation and preservation. Winter demanded careful handling of resources, every ounce of meat, hide, and marrow was critical for her children's survival. She worked methodically, cleaning and securing the animal with the skills inherited from generations before her, integrating knowledge from observation, trial, and careful instruction. This phase required not only physical exertion but strategic thought, protection from scavengers, efficient use of materials, and planning for storage in the frozen environment. The first kill, while fulfilling immediate needs, also demanded foresight and attention to detail, ensuring that the harvest would sustain them through the harsh months ahead. The emotional impact of this moment was profound. Relief, accomplishment, and a sense of continuity mingled with reverence for life taken and gratitude for sustenance provided. Her children's trust, dependence, and vulnerability underscored the significance of her actions. Survival was not a solitary endeavor, it was interwoven with the lives of those she cared for and the ecosystem that sustained them. Each act of provision carried layers of responsibility, reflection, and moral consideration. The mother recognized that the first kill was a bridge between knowledge and action, instinct and strategy, survival and ethical engagement with the natural world. Winter's harshness added a layer of urgency and consequence to every action. The first kill had been secured, and the mother now faced the next crucial task, preparing the meat and sharing it with her children. Winter's chill made every movement deliberate and precise, for exposure could sap strength and threaten survival. The forest around them remained quiet, as if observing this intimate, primal moment. She worked methodically, her hands skilled in cleaning, cutting, and organizing the deer, ensuring that nothing went to waste. Each motion reflected not only physical expertise but the culmination of lessons in observation, strategy, and patience. The forest, silent and watchful, had once again become her teacher, guiding every decision through the subtleties of light, terrain, and the presence of life both seen and unseen. Her children watched with quiet fascination, their small eyes wide as they absorbed the process. Though they were young, the forest was teaching them too, through observation, curiosity, and participation in this essential act. The mother recognized that survival was not just about immediate sustenance, it was about imparting knowledge, instilling patience, and modeling resilience. The act of sharing the feast was as much a lesson as a necessity. Through careful attention to her actions, they would learn the rhythms of the forest, the importance of preparation, and the responsibilities inherent in the cycle of life. Bonding and instruction were inseparable, woven together in a tapestry of care, sustenance, and survival. The forest seemed to slow with them, the wind softened, and the light shifted across the snow-covered terrain, creating a space of calm reflection. The mother divided the meat with meticulous care, portioning it to ensure that each child received sustenance while preserving enough for future days. The precision reflected the accumulated wisdom of weeks navigating the wilderness, balancing immediate need against long-term survival. Wolves had shown her the importance of efficiency and resourcefulness, and she mirrored their lessons in every movement. Each cut, each placement, was deliberate, reinforcing the principle that sustenance alone was insufficient without careful management and foresight. As the children began to eat, she observed them closely, noting both physical and emotional responses. Relief, warmth, and the subtle joy of nourishment filled the space around them. Their trust in her care reinforced the profound bond that survival demanded. Beyond feeding, she recognized that these moments of sharing and protection nurtured the psychological and emotional resilience necessary for enduring the harsh winter. The forest had always been a place of both danger and education, and the act of feasting became a quiet affirmation of life, connection, and the enduring strength of maternal care. During this quiet interlude, the mother reflected on the lessons embedded within the hunt and the preparation of the meal. Patience, observation, strategy, resilience, and ethical awareness converged in this act of nourishment. Each step, from tracking the deer to executing the kill, processing the meat, and sharing it with her children, demonstrated the interconnectedness of skill, experience, and care. Wolves had exemplified the integration of efficiency and instinct. Now, she translated those lessons into human terms, ensuring that survival encompassed not only physical sustenance but emotional continuity and moral responsibility. The children's engagement with the food was more than a physical necessity, it was a form of learning. They observed technique, mimicked careful handling, and internalized the rituals of survival that would one day become their own. Every movement and reaction was instructive, reinforcing patterns of behavior, awareness, and ethical engagement with their environment. The mother recognized the subtle transmission of knowledge occurring in this space. The hunt, the processing of resources, and the act of sharing were intertwined with education, guidance, and the shaping of instinct and understanding. The forest had become both classroom and witness, its stillness magnifying the lessons imparted through action and care. The act of eating together strengthened their bond, reinforcing mutual trust, interdependence, and the shared experience of survival. Winter's harshness had demanded vigilance, patience, and strategic planning, and now, in this fleeting moment of relative safety and warmth, connection became paramount. The mother's presence and competence reassured her children, while their engagement affirmed the purpose of her struggle. In the rhythm of sharing, eating, and observing, she discovered a profound sense of continuity. Life persisted not only through sustenance but through the bonds that sustained emotional, moral, and psychological resilience. The forest itself seemed to respond to this moment, its shadows softened, snow reflecting the dimming light, and the wind carrying the subtle scent of pine and cold air. This serene environment allowed reflection on the broader patterns of survival. Wolves had moved through their territories with precision, teaching lessons of timing, resourcefulness, and cooperation. The mother applied these lessons with nuance, integrating instinct with careful planning and ethical consideration. The act of feasting was not isolated, it existed within the larger narrative of the forest, winter, and life itself. Every bite, glance, and movement reinforced the ongoing interplay of predator, prey, environment, and human agency. In these moments, she also acknowledged the role of gratitude. The deer, though no longer alive, had provided sustenance, warmth, and an opportunity to teach her children. Respecting the life taken became an essential component of this ritual. Wolves exemplified a natural balance, taking only what was necessary, using their resources efficiently, and sustaining the cycle of life. She internalized this principle, demonstrating care and respect in the handling of meat, hides, and bones. Gratitude intertwined with practicality, ensuring that survival was imbued with mindfulness, reverence, and continuity of moral awareness. As the meal progressed, the mother encouraged her children to participate in small ways, gathering snow for water, assisting with organization of portions, and observing carefully the preparation for storage. These acts were educational, fostering responsibility, attentiveness, and practical skill. The forest, in its stillness, amplified every movement, teaching subtle lessons about rhythm, attention, and consequence. Through observation and participation, the children began to internalize the principles of survival, integrating them into their understanding of both environment and family. The act of feasting, thus, extended beyond nourishment, functioning as a bridge between physical survival, education, and emotional bonding. The calm and warmth of the shared meal also reinforced emotional resilience. Winter had demanded constant vigilance, endurance, and strategic thought, yet moments of connection provided essential psychological restoration. The mother and children sat close, sharing warmth, energy, and the unspoken reassurance of proximity and protection. As the sun sank behind the jagged horizon, casting long shadows across the snow-covered forest, nightfall descended with deliberate inevitability. The mother and her children were cocooned within their hidden thicket, yet the forest around them pulsed with life unseen, unpredictable, and unrelenting. Darkness heightened every sound, every subtle movement, and every scent carried weight. Her senses, already finely tuned from days of survival, sharpened further. The forest was alive in ways that daylight often obscured, and vigilance became paramount. Survival did not pause with the setting sun, rather, it demanded a new form of attention, an acute awareness of threats that could emerge from shadow or silence. She moved quietly, inspecting the immediate surroundings of the thicket, adjusting branches and snow coverings to create optimal concealment. Every step was deliberate, every motion controlled to avoid snapping twigs or disturbing snow that might alert predators. Wolves had demonstrated the importance of vigilance during night hunts, moving with calculated caution and sensitivity to environmental cues. The mother mirrored this behavior, blending instinct with observation, training, and reflection. Darkness magnified both danger and opportunity, and she navigated it with a balance of fear, respect, and strategic calculation. Each breath, sound, and shadow became data, guiding her decisions in real time. Her children huddled closely, shivering slightly against the cold. She drew them nearer, wrapping them in layered furs, and whispered reassurances to steady their small bodies and minds. The forest, though quiet, communicated lessons of survival even in the absence of visible threat. The mother reflected on the ethical and emotional dimensions of vigilance. Her responsibility extended beyond herself to these vulnerable lives dependent entirely on her awareness and judgment. Wolves, though instinct-driven, relied on the protection and coordination of the pack. She, too, was the guardian of her human family, translating knowledge and instinct into deliberate action that balanced protection, sustenance, and emotional reassurance. Nightfall heightened perception. The moon, pale and reflective on the snow, revealed textures and contours invisible during daylight. Trees cast elongated, shifting shadows, and frozen surfaces reflected faint glimmers that hinted at movement. Wolves had demonstrated the power of integrating multiple sensory inputs, sight, smell, sound, into a holistic understanding of surroundings. She mirrored this integration, pausing frequently to listen, to sniff the wind, and to observe subtle shifts in snow or vegetation. Every sign, every whisper of motion, carried meaning, a potential predator, a wandering herbivore, or simply the forest in its natural rhythm. Interpretation of these signals required both instinctive immediacy and reflective consideration, balancing reaction with analysis. As the darkness deepened, distant howls echoed through the cold air, resonating against the frozen trees and creating an almost spiritual tension. Wolves marked territory, communicated with their pack, and influenced the movement of prey through these vocal signals. The mother understood these sounds not as mere noise but as information. Each howl carried implications for her path, her timing, and her vigilance. The lessons of winter, observation, patience, and strategic adaptation, guided her responses. She adjusted her positioning slightly, taking advantage of natural cover, ensuring her children remained concealed, and maintaining readiness to respond to both opportunity and threat. Nightfall amplified the stakes, sharpening every instinct honed over weeks of survival. Shadows lengthened and merged, creating ambiguous shapes that demanded careful interpretation. A snow-laden branch swayed, its movement suggesting either wind or an approaching creature. She froze, assessing risk, analyzing patterns, and relying on instinct informed by observation. Wolves had demonstrated similar caution, interpreting subtle changes in the environment as signals that required immediate and measured response. She mirrored this vigilance, balancing fear and focus, restraint and action. Survival during nightfall required both physical readiness and mental clarity, integrating rapid assessment with deliberate motion. Each pause, each adjustment, reinforced her connection to the forest, her children, and the larger cycles of life around her. Cold seeped through her clothing, gnawing at muscles and joints, yet she remained alert, drawing warmth from controlled breathing, body positioning, and movement. Wolves relied on endurance and adaptability, conserving energy while remaining responsive. The mother adopted these lessons, pacing herself, minimizing unnecessary exertion, and focusing attention on the most critical environmental cues. The forest demanded efficiency. Every movement, every breath, every glance had purpose. Nightfall intensified these lessons, transforming vigilance into a multidimensional practice of awareness, adaptation, and strategic foresight. The children, nestled against her, were partially shielded from the immediate dangers of night, yet their small presence amplified her responsibility. Every rustle, every sigh, and every movement had to be accounted for. She monitored their breathing, adjusting furs and positioning, creating a buffer of protection while maintaining readiness for action. Wolves, too, protected their young with a combination of proximity, vigilance, and instinctual coordination. She translated these lessons into deliberate human practice, blending instinct with reflective planning. Nightfall became a lesson in balance, nurturing, vigilance, and preparation coexisting in harmony to ensure survival. Occasionally, the wind shifted, carrying scents that could indicate both opportunity and danger. The mother inhaled carefully, parsing layers of aroma, her children, the forest, distant prey, and predators. Wolves had taught the importance of scent as a navigational and defensive tool. She mirrored this attentiveness, integrating olfactory information with visual and auditory cues to maintain a comprehensive awareness of her surroundings. Nightfall magnified the significance of these signals, offering guidance, warning, and opportunity all at once. Each subtle change in environment demanded immediate interpretation, shaping decisions with profound consequence. Time became fluid in the darkness, measured less by minutes and hours than by environmental cues, bodily rhythms, and the subtle patterns of the forest. Wolves operated under similar principles, responding to shifts in light, temperature, and sound rather than fixed temporal markers. The mother synchronized her movements and focus with the nocturnal rhythm, pacing vigilance, rest, and readiness to match the forest's cycles. Every decision, from adjusting position to monitoring the children, reflected this integration of observation, instinct, and reflective judgment. Nightfall was no longer merely a backdrop, it was an active force shaping strategy, perception, and survival. Distant sounds, from the crack of ice to the shuffle of small animals, provided constant information, requiring interpretation and response. Wolves communicated through subtle auditory signals, adjusting behavior based on the presence of prey or competitors. She applied similar discernment, recognizing patterns, predicting movement, and preparing for both threat and opportunity. Her vigilance was active, deliberate, and adaptive, a continuous engagement with an environment that was both familiar and unpredictable. Nightfall demanded mastery over perception, focus, and instinct, integrating lessons learned throughout the hunt, the winter, and prior experiences of survival. The first light of dawn crept slowly across the horizon, casting a muted glow over the snow-laden forest. Shadows retreated, and the crisp winter air carried a subtle promise of renewal and possibility. The mother stirred, her body stiff from hours of vigilant stillness, yet her mind remained acutely attuned to the rhythms of the forest. Night had passed, survival maintained through patience, observation, and careful attention, and now the arrival of day signaled a shift in strategy, pace, and opportunity. Each daybreak brought a mixture of relief and renewed urgency, for sustenance and safety were never guaranteed, and the forest remained as alive and unpredictable as ever. Her children, stirred by the faint light and soft sounds of awakening wildlife, blinked sleepily but instinctively knew to remain close. The mother's presence provided warmth, reassurance, and the silent instruction of vigilance. The forest offered lessons anew with every dawn, tracks hidden in the fresh snow, the subtle bending of branches under weight, and the faint glint of ice along the creek revealed signs of prey and potential threats alike. She rose slowly, moving with deliberate care, adjusting furs and preparing for the tasks that daylight would demand. Wolves had relied on both night and day for survival, shifting patterns of observation and movement to align with environmental rhythms. She mirrored this adaptability, integrating instinct, reflection, and strategy into her renewed activity. The first hours of daylight became a time for assessment and planning. She scanned the forest with fresh eyes, noting changes wrought by the night, new tracks, displaced snow, and faint scents carried on the crisp morning air. Each detail contributed to a broader understanding of her surroundings, guiding decisions for the days. Movements. Observation remained as critical as ever. The forest provided opportunities and dangers in equal measure. She catalogued every sign, drawing upon experience and intuition to determine which paths might yield prey, which areas demanded caution, and where the forest offered concealment and advantage. Dawn, in this sense, was a transition not only from darkness to light but from reflection to action. As the children gradually became more alert, she prepared them for participation in the day's activities. Winter had imparted lessons of resilience, patience, and attentiveness, and now the morning offered an opportunity to practice, reinforce, and expand upon these skills. The mother guided small actions, gathering firewood, fetching water from the partially frozen creek, and observing tracks with careful curiosity. Each task, though seemingly minor, carried instruction, responsibility, and practical necessity. Wolves, through their interaction and reliance on pack cohesion, had demonstrated the integration of learning, cooperation, and survival. She applied these lessons within her human family, balancing nurture, instruction, and vigilance to ensure both immediate and long-term survival. Sunlight gradually intensified, illuminating textures and contrasts previously hidden in shadow. Ice sparkled on branches, snow reflected the pale gold of the dawn, and subtle movements of small animals became visible. She used this time to reassess prior knowledge. The paths of prey identified the previous day, signs of predators, and the most efficient routes through the terrain. Observation was an ongoing dialogue with the forest. Each new piece of information adjusted strategy and reinforced understanding. Wolves relied on such constant recalibration, and she too integrated this approach, blending instinct with methodical planning to maintain advantage in an environment that was both familiar and inherently unpredictable. The morning brought practical concerns to the forefront. Hunger, energy expenditure, and the demands of survival required careful management. The mother distributed portions of preserved meat from the previous day, ensuring her children were nourished and ready for action. Winter required meticulous rationing and foresight. Each morsel had significance beyond immediate satiation. She reflected on the ethical dimensions of this sustenance, recognizing that efficiency and care were intertwined with respect for life and responsibility for her children. The act of distributing food became a ritual of teaching, sustaining, and reinforcing the lessons embedded in survival, reflection, and moral awareness. Movement resumed cautiously as the forest stirred with the arrival of day. Birds called faintly from treetops, and the faint scurrying of small mammals punctuated the stillness. Wolves had demonstrated the value of early morning vigilance and action, capitalizing on the activity of prey while avoiding the full visibility of daylight. She mirrored these behaviors, choosing paths that maximized concealment, observation, and the potential for successful hunting. Her senses, sharpened from months of survival, parsed every detail: the tilt of a branch, the depth of a footprint, the faintest scent on the wind. Dawn was a continuation of the forest's instruction, a canvas for application of instinct, reflection, and learned skill. The children remained close, observing her movements, mimicking small behaviors, and internalizing the lessons of attentiveness and care. Each step was both protective and instructive, balancing the immediate needs of safety with the long-term goal of cultivating survival skills. Wolves demonstrated similar teaching behaviors, with adults guiding the young through observation, imitation, and correction. The mother recognized that instruction was continuous, embedded in every action, choice, and response to the forest's challenges. Dawn offered a natural transition from reflection to engagement, combining nourishment, preparation, and teaching into a seamless, vital process. As the sun rose higher, the light revealed subtle new opportunities. Tracks in fresh snow, movements of distant prey, and shifting patterns of wind and temperature guided decisions for the hunt and the day's navigation. Observation remained central. The forest communicated constantly, offering data that required interpretation and action. The forest stretched endlessly before them, a landscape of snow-dusted trees, frozen streams, and uneven terrain that tested both endurance and perception. Dawn's light revealed more than just beauty, it exposed opportunities, obstacles, and subtle signs of life that demanded constant attention. The mother moved steadily, her children close, weaving through the forest with cautious precision. Each step required energy, calculation, and awareness, for the frozen wilderness allowed no margin for error. The journey, though fueled by the success of the previous hunt, was far from over. Survival demanded constant movement, observation, and adaptation, a relentless rhythm dictated by necessity, instinct, and environmental cues. The children, still learning the lessons of vigilance and patience, mirrored her movements, stepping carefully, observing tracks, and practicing silence. Their small hands brushed snow-laden branches, and their eyes scanned the forest floor for signs of prey or danger. The mother guided them subtly, whispering reminders, pointing to footprints, or drawing attention to changes in light and shadow that revealed hidden patterns. Wolves had demonstrated the value of teaching the young through participation and observation, and she employed the same method. Each step, pause, and careful motion became an opportunity for instruction. The journey was as much about cultivating skill, awareness, and resilience as it was about covering distance or finding food. Snow crunched softly beneath their feet, masking their movement yet revealing faint disturbances to those trained to interpret them. The mother remained attentive to the smallest details, the angle of a broken twig, the depth of a footprint, the subtle scent carried on the wind. These cues informed decisions about path, pace, and potential encounters with wildlife. Wolves thrived by interpreting similar signals, using experience, instinct, and keen observation to guide pack movement and hunting strategy. She integrated these lessons seamlessly, blending instinct, reflection, and careful analysis into every movement. The journey was a continuous negotiation with the forest, requiring adaptation, patience, and acute awareness. The rhythm of travel alternated between long stretches of measured movement and brief pauses for observation. The mother scanned the horizon, noting the orientation of trees, the flow of water under ice, and the subtle shifts in wind that could carry sense of prey or predator. Each pause allowed her to synthesize information, recalibrate strategy, and teach her children to do the same. Observation was not passive, it was active engagement, a mental and physical exercise that reinforced survival skills. Wolves demonstrated similar behavior, pausing strategically to reassess, communicate, and adjust movement. She mirrored these behaviors, using each pause to reinforce lessons of patience, attentiveness, and tactical awareness. The forest itself seemed to shift with them, revealing new challenges and unexpected opportunities. Snowdrifts blocked paths, fallen trees created obstacles, and frozen streams required careful navigation. Every decision demanded consideration of energy expenditure, risk, and reward. Wolves taught the efficiency of movement, conserving strength while maximizing outcomes. She applied these lessons, selecting paths that minimized effort while maintaining stealth and proximity to potential prey. The journey was both physical and cognitive, requiring constant integration of sensory information, reflective analysis, and instinctual response. Each step forward was a deliberate act of survival, strategy, and education. Her children occasionally stumbled but were quickly guided back into rhythm, learning the necessity of balance, focus, and persistence. Winter had already instilled in them an awareness of environmental risk and reward, but the ongoing journey provided continual reinforcement. Observation became second nature. They noted tracks, interpreted wind patterns, and recognized the subtle signs of animal activity. Wolves had relied on similar methods, teaching through demonstration, correction, and shared vigilance. The mother integrated these lessons seamlessly, ensuring that learning was embedded in action and that awareness was cultivated alongside endurance, resourcefulness, and emotional resilience. The wind shifted, carrying distant sounds and scents that prompted heightened alertness. Wolves relied on such signals to adjust movement, anticipate prey, and avoid danger. She mirrored this attentiveness, adjusting her path, posture, and pace in response to subtle cues. The forest provided constant feedback. The snap of ice, the rustle of small mammals, and the movement of branches all conveyed information that could dictate immediate decisions. The journey demanded ongoing interpretation, decision-making, and adaptation. Each choice affected not only the success of their search for sustenance but also the safety, morale, and development of her children as they learned to navigate the harsh environment. Sunlight continued to shift across the forest, revealing hidden textures, subtle contrasts, and the glint of ice along streams and frozen pools. Each detail offered insight into animal behavior, potential hazards, and environmental rhythms. Wolves had demonstrated the necessity of interpreting these subtleties, combining observation, intuition, and memory to navigate their territories effectively. She employed the same integration, scanning the environment, anticipating obstacles, and adjusting movement with both caution and efficiency. The journey became a layered exercise of perception, decision-making, and adaptability, each step reinforcing the continuous cycle of learning, action, and reflection. Fatigue began to press against their bodies, yet the mother paced carefully, balancing effort and rest. Wolves demonstrated the importance of energy management, conserving strength while remaining responsive to environmental cues. She guided her children in the same way, encouraging pauses, offering sustenance, and reinforcing techniques for minimizing unnecessary exertion.